Chapter 45-22. Roar! The flying crane immortal beast figure flashed, leaving behind a string of afterimages as it chased after Xiaohua. This time, its tail pierced towards Xiaohua's chest from the bottom. At the tip of the tail, a sharp cone-like protrusion flashed with red light. Even the space was about to be burned into fragments by the red light. Although Xiaohua's figure was unbalanced in the air, his expression changed greatly when he saw the flying crane immortal beast's tail piercing towards him. His entire body curled up in the air, and a vortex of afterimages bloomed in the air. The flying crane immortal beast's tail pierced into one of the vortexes. Whoosh! At the same time, Xiaohua's figure appeared in another place. He did not stop at all, and like flowing water, he rushed into the flying crane immortal beast's body. Without waiting for the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws to attack, Xiaohua had already landed on the flying crane immortal beast's body. With a shake of his hand, the immortal tool that condensed the innate primordial water was already in his hand. He raised his arm and was about to stab it into the flying crane immortal beast's back. At this moment, the markings on the flying crane immortal beast's scales lit up, and the fur or feathers between the scales began to move. This movement was very strange. It was like the beating of a drum, and the space around Xiaohua was trembling. Not good! Seeing the powerful fluctuations in the space, how could Xiaohua care about killing the flying crane immortal beast? He growled and hurriedly urged his soul power to escape from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Boom! Just as Xiaohua left, tens of thousands of flames flew out from the void and connected with the red light on the flying crane immortal beast's scales. A sea of fire enveloped the surrounding space of a few hundred feet. Damn it! Xiaohua had already used the fire origin to temper his body, but when he touched the fire of the immortal realm, his body showed signs of melting. It seemed like he did not dare to take the risk. Xiaohua cursed and crashed into the damaged palace. How could the flying crane immortal beast let Xiaohua go? It roared and also crashed into the palace. The palaces of the heavenly abode collapsed one after another, like an earth dragon rolling under the ground. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios Suji and Fairy Xingyu were also chased to the left by the Gallium immortal beast. Hearing the collapsing stone walls, Suji's expression changed and he transmitted his voice. Xingyu, quick! Xiaohua is being chased by the Gallium immortal beast. All right. Fairy Xingyu scanned the area with her mind and saw that there were two celestial phalanx beasts behind Suji. She knew that Xiaohua was also targeted by the celestial phalanx beasts. She did not dare to be careless. With a flash, she crossed the courtyard outside the hall and was about to rush over. However, just as she passed by, she suddenly frowned and her gaze fell on the ground. However, she only glanced at it for a moment before the fire pillar behind her attacked her. Fairy Xingyu had no choice but to dodge it. On the other side of the hall, Suji's body was also flickering with silver light and lightning as he quickly rushed over. However, when Suji and Fairy Xingyu rushed into the main hall and saw the situation inside, they couldn't help but gasp. Their hearts were completely cold. At this time, Xiaohua had been smashed into the stone wall by the flying crane immortal beast with its tail. Half of his body was embedded in the wall. Except for the huge flying fork in his left arm, which could still move, the rest of his body was riddled with injuries. Damn it! Suji was shocked and did not hesitate to activate his immortal chi. However, even if an immortal had arrived, it was already too late. The flying crane immortal beast turned its head slightly and glanced at Suji and Fairy Xingyu. Roar! It opened its mouth and tried to devour Xiaohua. However, the entire space in front of Xiaohua was distorted. The stone wall where Xiaohua was located shook violently. Everything was covered by the devouring power of the flying crane immortal beast. Xiaohua's hands and feet were also swaying in the wind like withered branches. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly moved. He waved the flying fork in his left hand, and the huge flying fork flew into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth faster than a meteor. Unsurprisingly, the flying fork fell into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth along with some gravel. As soon as the flying fork fell in, the flying crane immortal beast was shocked, as if it had sensed something. Without any hesitation, the phalanx immortal beast let out a deep roar as a crimson flame burst out of its mouth. It would have been fine if the flame had not been born. As soon as it was born, a huge explosion came from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Moreover, this explosion sounded like firecrackers, from its slender neck to its tail. Following this explosion, the flying crane immortal beast's neck exploded, and its body exploded. Even its tail exploded. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The flying crane immortal beast, which even an immortal could not kill, turned into blood clots just like that. How is this possible? Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were not the only ones who were stunned on the spot. They looked at Xiaohua, who seemed to be on the verge of death, in disbelief. Even the 4 flying crane immortal beasts stopped in midair, not knowing what to do. However, in just a moment, the blood chi on the flying crane immortal beast's corpse aroused the bestial nature of the 4 flying crane immortal beasts. The flying crane immortal beasts roared and pounced on Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu again. Rumble! Su Ji urged the lightning to fight with the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu also waved the star saber and the moon saber to resist. For a moment, there was chaos, and no one paid attention to Xiaohua. Damn it! I finally found the flying crane immortal beast's weakness! Xiaohua could have escaped, but at this time, he was indeed a little weak and numb, so he simply hid on the stone wall and pretended to be dead. His mind had already entered the space. On one hand, he was looking for an ice-type immortal weapon, and on the other, he was refining the innate primordial water to the sharp points of the immortal weapons. After refining the 4 immortal weapons, Xiaohua naturally couldn't give them to Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu in front of them. He just threw the 4 immortal weapons far away, waiting for an opportunity to remind them. Just as Xiaohua was thinking about how to open his mouth, the 4 flying jade immortal beasts suddenly stopped. Then, they raised their heads and looked towards a certain direction at the same time. Finally, they let out a few cries in unison and spread their wings. They actually abandoned Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu and broke through the roof of the heavenly abode. They flew into the sky and disappeared in a moment. Phew! Xiaohua let out a long breath, feeling as if he had just survived a disaster. As Su Ji rushed into the sky, he released his spiritual sense to investigate, and ordered Fairy Xingyu to rescue Xiaohua. Fairy Xingyu pulled Xiaohua out of the stone wall. Xiaohua took the opportunity to fall to the ground like a pile of mud. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and said, "Elder sister! You'd better not save me. Let me die. This space fragment is already so dangerous. Even the immortal beasts in your immortal realm are so powerful. How can we go to the other space fragments?" Fairy Xingyu also put away her previous smile and nodded. "You're right. This space fragment is really too strange. This Star Moon Palace is also different from what we thought before. Then we should retreat first and go to the other space fragments." "Can't we?" Xiaohua suggested. "Instead of retreating, it's better to go forward," Fairy Xingyu answered without hesitation. At this time, Su Ji landed and said in disbelief, "These flying crane immortal beasts really left. It's really strange." "There's nothing strange about it," Fairy Xingyu replied. "There are only 2 possibilities. First, there are not only 5 flying crane immortal beasts in this space fragment, but also other flying crane immortal beasts in groups. And this possibility is very high. I remember that flying crane immortal beasts always appear in groups. Second, the 4 great families and the great demons of the demon clan have also stepped into this space fragment. They have many people and are weak. Naturally, they will be easily discovered by the flying crane immortal beasts. No matter what the possibility is, now that the flying crane immortal beasts have indeed left, we should quickly find the location of this space fragment," Xiaohua urged. Hearing this, Su Ji looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, "The space fragment and the meteor belt seem to be opposite from each other from the outside. However, inside the space fragment, these 2 positions don't necessarily have to be opposite. And no one knows where this position is. Sometimes it's at the top of a mountain, sometimes it's at the seaside, and sometimes it's in a cave. However, this place usually has the power of the stars and moon seeping out. I can use the star shuttle to find the approximate location. Big sister, hurry up and activate it. Thinking of how Fairy Xingyu did not say anything after entering the space fragment, and how she was not in a hurry, Xiaohua could not help but feel a little anxious and urged her. When I entered the space fragment, I already activated the star shuttle. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, but at that time, I didn't find the location of the exit. Ah? You activated the star shuttle at that time to find the exit? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Although he was confused by Fairy Xingyu's smile at that time, he still had some impression of it. He thought that Fairy Xingyu was just testing the immortal qi in the space fragment. He did not expect that she was looking for the exit. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, then what did you think I was doing? The immortal qi in Suji's and my body is very precious. How could I use it casually? Big sister, what about now? Xiaohua asked again. The situation is urgent now. No matter how precious the immortal qi is, you have to activate it. Do you think I don't want to activate the star shuttle? I want to activate it too, Fairy Xingyu said helplessly. But the immortal qi used to activate the star shuttle to find the exit is far from what is used to attack. I can't activate a large amount of immortal qi at this time, or my body will collapse. Alas, okay. Xiaohua had already seen some blood flowing under Suji's armor. He knew that what Fairy Xingyu said was true. He sighed and said, Senior, quickly take some pills to heal your injuries. Okay. Fairy Xingyu nodded and took another pill. After she sat down, Suji looked at the ruins around him and said, You two rest here. Be careful and hide yourselves. I'll go outside to explore and see what's going on with the Gallium Immortal Beasts. If it's a group of Gallium Immortal Beasts, we have to plan early. Chapter 45-23. Suji, I'll go with you. When Fairy Xingyu heard this, she could no longer sit still. She hurriedly stood up and said, I'm worried if you go alone. I can avoid the flying crane immortal beast without using my immortal qi. You'd better cultivate here. Of course, Suji didn't want Fairy Xingyu to follow him. Fairy Xingyu said again, I don't need to cultivate with my injuries. Moreover, your injuries are more serious than mine. Why don't you go with me? We can take care of each other. Besides, if the flying crane immortal beast comes, I won't be able to resist it. Oh, and if I go with you, I can also explore the exit to the meteor belt, right? But... Suji looked at Xiaohua, who was lying on the ground, and said, If we all leave, what will happen to Xiaohua? Didn't you see that he could kill the flying crane immortal beast? Oh, right, Xiaohua, how did you kill the flying crane immortal beast? Fairy Xingyu suddenly remembered and hurriedly asked. Xiaohua was sweating profusely. He thought that Fairy Xingyu would ask this question first, but when they were about to leave, he remembered such an important matter. Xiaohua pretended not to frown and said, It was just a coincidence. When I saw that the flying crane immortal beast was a fire-type immortal beast, I thought of killing it with a water-type immortal artifact. However, I couldn't take out my immortal artifact, so I simply looked around the hall for immortal artifacts. I couldn't use the ones that were too big, and I couldn't use the ones that needed immortal qi. I just happened to see an ice-type flying fork. The size was just right. I took it to protect myself. I also tried to use the flying fork to pierce the flying crane immortal beast's body, but I couldn't get close to the flying crane immortal beast. In the end, when the flying crane immortal beast was about to swallow me, I had a flash of inspiration and threw the flying fork into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth. Xiaohua shrugged when he spoke up to this point. However, the pain in his body caused him to frown again. He said with difficulty, Senior, you saw it too. The flying kite immortal beast was accidentally killed by me just like that. Well, fire and water are incompatible. I've also thought about using an ice attribute immortal artifact to kill the kite immortal beast. Suji nodded. But the immortal artifact I found wasn't as powerful as Xiaohua's flying fork. It could only injure the flying crane immortal beasts and wasn't able to kill them. This junior found the flying fork there. Senior, do you have another look to see if there's anything suitable? Xiaohua said as he pointed towards the distant main hall. Suji shook his head. That won't be necessary. Fairy Xingyue stood up and said, Let's take a look. Maybe there are some high-grade immortal artifacts. All right, go ahead and look for it. As he spoke, Suji looked around once more, and then he pointed towards the distance and said, Xiaohua, there's a small hall over there. I presume the flying crane immortal beast is unable to enter. Alas, forget it, I'll take you there. As he spoke, Suji rolled up his sleeves and lifted Xiaohua into the air. Just as he was about to fly away, Fairy Xingyu, who was next to him, said in surprise, Suji, come and take a look. These celestial artifacts are all compatible. They are similar to the flying fork that Xiaohua mentioned. Suji didn't mind. He had already tried it before and felt that Xiaohua was just lucky. Now that he heard Fairy Xingyu mention it, he said, Take them first. I'll send Xiaohua over, and then we'll go out and explore. Okay. Fairy Xingyu put away the immortal artifacts that Xiaohua had sealed with innate primordial water and took a few more. Then she urged her figure to catch up with Suji. However, just as she was about to leave the main hall, she glanced at the courtyard again and whispered to herself, Is there someone else in this heavenly mansion? But if there's someone else, why didn't I notice it? Maybe it's just an illusion. In just a moment, Suji and Fairy Xingyu both rushed out of the heavenly mansion and went far away. After half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua flew out from the main hall while humming a little tune. He shouted loudly, Xiaoguo, master! Xiaoguo was really frightened. Her face was still pale as she looked around, her eyes darting around. It's okay. That damn flying crane immortal beast has been killed by master, Xiaohua said with a smile. Hurry up and take these immortal herbs and immortal wood. There's still a fairy, Xiaoguo hurriedly said. She seemed to have noticed me just now. Oh? Really? That's a little troublesome. Xiaohua frowned, but after a moment he smiled and said, Don't worry about her. Just take them. Even if she found out, she could only be suspicious. Otherwise, she would have said that when she came back, she would push everything to the flying crane immortal beast. What does that have to do with us? Okay. Xiaoguo was emboldened when she heard this. She handed a storage bag to Xiaohua and said, I just put this away. Master, take it first. I'll tidy it up when I get home. Xiaohua took it and put it into the space without looking at it. However, after a moment, he asked curiously, Xiaoguo, can you use storage bags here? Yes, master knows. This storage bag is not the same as the one master uses. It was refined by Master Lei Ting using immortal wood. Xiaoguo hurriedly answered. Hee, so that's how it is. Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand. You still have a lot of these things, right? Yes, master. Xiaoguo smiled and said, Enough to take away all the immortal herbs and immortal wood in the main hall. Good. Xiaohua waved his hand heroically. Go ahead and do it. You and master will work hard together. Move this heavenly mansion into our house and let our Fortune Gate disciples enjoy it. Yes, I understand. Xiaoguo's face lit up when she heard that she could work hard together with Xiaohua. She was really excited. She slipped into the ground and disappeared. Then Xiaohua saw that inside the courtyard, large patches of immortal herbs were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Since he had already made up his mind to empty the heavenly abode, Xiaohua no longer held back. Activating his soul power, he flew up and went along the side of the main hall. Wherever Xiaohua passed, the armors and immortal tools disappeared. The decorations and jades in the main hall also disappeared. Only broken corpses and collapsed stone walls were blown by the wind under the sunlight, as if they were howling in grief. The Nidome Heavenly Mansion was really big. There were all kinds of halls in an endless line. Even inside the halls, there were often secret rooms. However, all these secrets were exposed after the entire heavenly mansion's restrictions were destroyed. Xiaohua released his soul force to the limit and didn't miss a single spot. His mind, which could even absorb the netherworld blood sea into the space, tirelessly searched the heavenly mansion. He didn't miss a single immortal tool. Even so, Xiaohua flew for more than 10 hours before he finished walking through the entire heavenly mansion. Finally, he completed his task and moved all the things in the Nidome heavenly mansion into the space. Xiaohua was tired, but Xiaoguo was even more tired than him. Xiaohua still had some misgivings. He didn't dare to take things that were too broken, and he didn't dare to take things that were too obvious. He was afraid that Suji and Fairy Xingyu would find flaws when they returned. Xiaoguo, on the other hand, didn't have any misgivings. She took all the immortal herbs, immortal fruits, and immortal wood in the heavenly mansion into the space. Not a single one was left out. At this time, Xiaoguo had already returned to the space. She looked at the immortal fruits and immortal herbs with some worry. She could clearly feel that the heaven and earth origin energy of Xinhua continent was very different from the immortal spirit energy in the space fragment. She couldn't guarantee that these immortal herbs would survive well after being planted. Maybe the aura of that medicinal pill. Xiaoguo suddenly thought of the mysterious medicinal pill that had appeared in the space before. That medicinal pill had disappeared from Xinhua continent ever since Xiaohua's space evolved. Naturally, Xiaoguo hadn't seen it for a long time. However, she had already obtained a lot of alchemy techniques from that medicinal pill. Xiaoguo hadn't completely mastered the alchemy techniques yet. At this time, when Xiaoguo saw these immortal woods, she naturally associated them with the aura of the mysterious gold core. Xiaohua naturally didn't know about Xiaoguo's distress. He casually strolled around and finally arrived at a majestic hall. There were many things in this hall, but as soon as Xiaohua entered the hall, his gaze was immediately attracted to a throne in the hall. Although this throne seemed to have been split into two halves by a sword, it seemed to be hidden in the void and also seemed to be towering over the throne. A kind of unforgettable will emerged from this throne. This will was like the center of the heavenly palace, making Xiaohua feel that it was difficult to approach. When his gaze landed on it, it was as if he was looking at an incomparably huge mountain. Xiaohua had never seen Immortal Emperor Go Chen's throne, nor had he seen Mahavairakana's 9-grade lotus platform. However, he had seen the dragon thrones of the dragon palaces of the 4 seas. Those 4 dragon thrones added together were probably not comparable to the jewel on this throne. Since even Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu could not get close to the throne, Xiaohua naturally could not. Xiaohua shifted his gaze away from the throne and looked at the plaque on the jade wall behind the throne. The plaque was already in tatters, and the dazzling words on it were not something Xiaohua could understand. When his gaze landed on it, the words had already turned into a dazzling color that did not form a word. Damn it, isn't it just a celestial venerable? How can you bully people like this? Look at the name of the heavenly mansion. What's there to be afraid of? It's not like I'll lose a single hair. Xiaohua curled his lips and muttered to himself. Moreover, your entire heavenly mansion has been moved away by someone. Thinking about this, Xiaohua couldn't help but cover his mouth and laugh. Wasn't this person talking about himself? Then, Xiaohua decided to go all the way. He released his consciousness again and collected all the inconspicuous things in the hall. He believed that even if Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu came back, they might not be able to find anything. Xiaohua had absolute confidence in this aspect. After cleaning the hall, Xiaohua turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as he turned around, his gaze fell on the milky white plaque unwillingly. He pinched his chin, and there was a little embarrassment in his eyes. It seemed that he was angry because he couldn't move the entire hall away. After a while, Xiaohua raised his right hand and pointed his thumb between his eyebrows. He whispered, "Open!" A dark green brilliance flashed between his eyebrows, and the delusion breaker Dharma eye opened. Then, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Hiss! P.S. Thank you for your support, fellow Taoists, Benbin. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Qidien to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 45-24. Through the delirium breaker Dharma eye, Xiaohua saw a layer of dazzling brilliance on the huge throne. A light shadow that looked like a huge hammer that had been split in half was faintly flashing in the void. The halo pierced the Dharma eye like a golden needle, causing Xiaohua's Dharma eye to feel pain. He couldn't help but sigh. This throne is really powerful. However, before Xiaohua could raise his Dharma eye to look at the words on the plaque, he was suddenly stunned again. He stood there in disbelief and then hurriedly closed his Dharma eye. When the soreness in his Dharma eye slowly disappeared, he took a few steps forward, wanting to get closer to the throne. Unfortunately, he only took 2 steps before the invisible aura of the throne blocked him. Xiaohua walked around the throne again, but he still couldn't get close to it. When he reached the side of the hall, Xiaohua opened his Dharma eye again. Sure enough, at the bottom of the throne that looked like a hammer, a golden square light shadow the size of a fist appeared in his eyes. This light shadow was like a candle flame in the wind, flattened and swaying for a while. Most of the time, it was covered by the light of the throne. If not for the delirium breaker Dharma eye, he definitely wouldn't have been able to see it. Imperial Jade Seal? Golden Seal? Seeing the light shadow instantly fill up and become a square body, Xiaohua suddenly came to his senses and thought of the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal he had obtained from the 2 corpses. Damn it! Xiaohua was a little hesitant. After all, so much time had passed. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu could come back at any time. Moreover, if he took out the Imperial Jade Seal and Golden Seal, who knew what kind of aura or abnormality there would be? If he accidentally fell into the trap, wouldn't everything before be for naught? I'd better go. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said to himself. This is the Yiqiong Heavenly Abode. Although Fairy Xingyu and Suji didn't say which big shot lived here, looking at the extravagance of this heavenly abode, it's not an ordinary immortal. I'd better. Thoughts were just thoughts. If the money grubber Xiaohua stopped now, he wouldn't be Xiaohua. After hesitating for a moment, Xiaohua observed the light shadow again. Fortunately, there were still some differences between the Imperial Jade Seal and the Golden Seal. In a moment, Xiaohua already knew that the owner of the Imperial Jade Seal was the owner of this heavenly abode. Therefore, Xiaohua first released his soul sense to check if there were any strange movements nearby, then hurriedly took out the Imperial Jade Seal. As soon as the Imperial Jade Seal appeared, it immediately emitted a milky white halo. This halo also took the shape of a hammer. Xiaohua held the Imperial Jade Seal, and the halo blocked the aura of the throne. Xiaohua effortlessly walked to the front of the throne. The shadow of the Imperial Jade Seal was below the throne. Although the throne was split into 2, Xiaohua was still unable to move the throne away. Xiaohua released his consciousness. The entire throne was heavier than a mountain, and he couldn't collect it. Xiaohua looked again. The right hand of the throne was on a square shelf. Xiaohua did not hesitate to place the Imperial Jade Seal on the shelf. Shua! As the Imperial Jade Seal fell, a milky white brilliance immediately emerged from the throne, spreading all around the heavenly abode. Although Xiaohua couldn't see it clearly, he could sense that layers upon layers of profound restrictions were slowly being activated, and the entire heavenly abode began to slowly shake. Mother *Cur! Xiaohua panicked and shouted. I didn't want to activate the restrictions of the heavenly abode. With this, no matter how stupid Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu are, they will know that I did something. Helpless, Xiaohua hurriedly released his consciousness to put the throne back into the space. Unfortunately, the throne was still as steady as a mountain, not moving at all. Xiaohua was helpless. He hastily picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again. Strangely, when he picked up the Imperial Jade Seal again, swoosh! The Imperial Jade Seal glowed brilliantly and landed on the throne. The enormous throne immediately transformed into a ray of light and shadow. Following Xiaohua's silent chant, Receive, receive, receive! It fell into the Imperial Jade Seal. With the throne gone, only an empty space was left. Naturally, the naked eye still couldn't see the shadow of the Imperial Jade Seal. Xiaohua opened his delirium eyes and looked at the shadow, waiting for the shadow to fill up into the shape of the Imperial Jade Seal again. At the same time, he was burning with anxiety. His soul sense swept the surroundings of the heavenly abode, fearing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu would return at this time. In just half a cup of tea's time, in Xiaohua's eyes, a day passed like a year. Seeing the shadow gradually take shape, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to put the Imperial Jade Seal in the shadow. Boom! At the place where the Imperial Jade Seal landed, the light and shadow suddenly exploded. It was as if a huge hammer had filled the entire hall. Xiaohua's law eye seemed to have been pierced by a sharp sword. A burst of intense pain came, causing him to hastily close his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw a bright light like the scorching sun in front of him. Layers of brilliance shone out from a door in front of him. Under the brilliance of this light, his body became transparent. Since he had already reached this point and made such a big movement, Xiaohua didn't have time to regret it. He stepped into the door. Heavens! Xiaohua, who had always expressed his surprise with Holy sh*t, actually shouted, Holy sh*t! Now. These two words were enough to express his feelings. Because, just inside this door, there was another huge space. Inside the space, there were many armors, immortal weapons, war chariots, and other things neatly arranged. Moreover, in places that were almost impossible to see, there were even more things that Xiaohua didn't recognize at all. At this time, other than shock, Xiaohua only had one thought. Holy sh*t before. I really worked for nothing. More than dozens of hours of work, I might as well have found this space. The ancients said it well, as long as the direction is right, the sweat won't be in vain. The ancients really didn't deceive me. At this time, ka ka ka. A sound like glass cracking came from the top of Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua hurriedly looked up and saw that outside the milky white space, layers of dragon-like cracks flashed from time to time. And in these cracks, Xiaohua was very familiar with the fluctuations of space collapsing violently rushed in. Not good. Xiaohua immediately thought of the annihilation of space when he met the first Tian Xian in the Dawn Rain continent. This space itself is inside the Heavenly Palace, and the fragment of the Immortal Realm where the Heavenly Palace is located is separated from the Immortal Realm. Now that it has fallen into the meteor belt, this space naturally can't exist forever. If this Xiao didn't happen to come in today, I'm afraid that after this space was annihilated, everything inside would no longer exist. Collect. Xiaohua saw that there wasn't much time left, and hurriedly released his mind to collect the things inside the space. However, when Xiaohua's mind looked again, this space seemed to be limitless, but his mind was already unable to keep up with the speed of the space collapsing. He saw that a corner of the space had already collapsed. Imperial Jade Seal! Xiaohua's mind was blessed. He hurriedly waved his hand, and the Imperial Jade Seal floating not far away fell into his hand. Collect! Xiaohua almost couldn't wait to shout loudly. Shua! The Imperial Jade Seal didn't disappoint Xiaohua. A brilliance fell into the space. When the brilliance disappeared, the space was already completely empty. Awesome! Xiaohua slapped his thigh and hurriedly sent his mind to collect the Imperial Jade Seal back into the space. Only then did he feel completely relieved. Rumble! At this time, the space above Xiaohua's head had already collapsed, letting out a thunderous sound. However, the space collapse this time was different from before. After the space vortex, there wasn't a chaotic void, but a starry sky. There were many space fragments in the starry sky, and these fragments were wantonly fluttering all the time. These fragments had a faint brilliance. Some were in the shape of strips, some were in the shape of squares, some were in the shape of 6 stars, and most of the fragments didn't have any fixed shape. For a while, they were in the shape of a circle, and for a while, they were in the shape of a sheet. Isn't this a meteor belt? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. However, In an instant, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, the exit of the space fragment that Fairy Xingyu couldn't find with her star shuttle was here. It was the place that was blocked by the hidden space of the heavenly mansion. Su Ji had said clearly before that the exit of the space fragment could be anywhere in the space fragment. It could be at the top of a mountain, at the bottom of the sea, in the forest, or in the pavilion. And the exit of the immortal realm fragment was in the space that was suppressed by the throne. If Xiaohua hadn't taken the Heavenly Master's Imperial Jade Seal, if he hadn't taken the throne, and if he hadn't used the Imperial Jade Seal to open this hidden space, even if the hidden space that blocked the exit collapsed, the exit would still be suppressed by the throne. Even if Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu racked their brains, they wouldn't be able to find the exit of this space fragment. Seeing the meteor belt appear, Xiaohua's first reaction was to open his delirium Dharma eye. Although the delirium Dharma eye was in severe pain at this time, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent when it concerned his life. A moment later, the space collapsed to the door. Kacha! With a cracking sound, the door cracked open. Xiaohua closed his Dharma eye and flew out of the door. When he looked at the hall again, more than half of the jade wall with the plaque had fallen into the void, and the entire hall was still disappearing rapidly. "Oh, my hall!" Xiaohua cried out involuntarily. He immediately released his consciousness, and wantonly put everything in the hall into the space. At this time, seeing that the space collapse was about to swallow the entire heavenly palace, wasn't it a good time for Xiaohua to destroy the corpse and destroy the evidence? What other scruples did he have? Soon, the heavenly palace began to disappear from the center, and a meteor belt appeared clearly. However, the speed of the space collapse didn't slow down at all. Not only did it spread into the depths of the heavenly palace, it also spread out of the heavenly palace. Xiaohua's initial joy began to turn into fear. He released his soul consciousness and flew out of the heavenly palace. The aura of the space collapse began to rush out of the heavenly palace and spread throughout the entire space. Xiaohua flew out of the heavenly palace, flew up a high slope, and stood there quietly. His gaze fell on what seemed to be the location of the heavenly palace. At this time, the center of the heavenly palace had become an oval-shaped starry sky, and the surrounding edges were rapidly becoming transparent and disappearing. Moreover, this oval-shaped starry sky also extended in all directions, like a big mouth of starry sky, swallowing the space fragment. Chapter 45-25. Roar, roar! A burst of extremely chaotic cries came from afar. Clearly, the huge commotion in the heavenly palace had attracted the attention of the flying crane immortal beasts. Hearing the many cries, Xiaohua was already prepared in his heart, but, when he turned around and saw thousands of flying crane immortal beasts, he was completely dumbfounded. How was this still the rhythm of letting people live? At this moment, a voice that sounded calm yet was filled with anxiety sounded out from in front of the group of flying crane immortal beasts. "Xiaohua, quickly! Quickly find a suitable spatial fragment!" Xiaohua came back to his senses and looked over. He saw that in front of the ferocious flying dagger immortal beasts, there was actually a flying boat. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were standing on it. Behind the two of them, there were many figures. However, Xiaohua could hear Su Ji's voice clearly. "Okay!" Xiaohua responded and was about to fly up. His heart skipped a beat. He withdrew his soul power and ran down the mountain. Although he looked vigorous, he was still far from flying. "Senior!" Xiaohua acted very well. He raised his head and shouted, "I can't fly! Come and pick me up!" Of course, Xiaohua did not use his soul power when he shouted. As for whether Su Ji could hear him, only God knew. Su Ji could not hear what Xiaohua was saying, but he already understood when he saw Xiaohua dancing on the hillside. Su Ji turned to Fairy Xingyu and said, "Xingyu, get ready to activate the star shuttle and find a suitable spatial fragment." "Yes." Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and took out her star shuttle. However, when she was about to activate her immortal spiritual energy, she smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, I've already used up too much immortal spiritual energy when I fought the flying crane immortal beast earlier. I can't even activate the star shuttle now. Okay. Suji nodded. He looked up at the meteor belt in the distance and said, You can use your experience to find a spatial fragment to enter first. I'll go and save Xiaohua first. Okay. Fairy Xingyu nodded. She looked down at the flying boat under her feet and said, With the Dongfang family's celestial imperial equipment, we will have some assurance when we enter the meteor belt. As long as there is no celestial kite beast in the space fragments that fall, there shouldn't be any problems. Dongfang Yushan. Suji did not say anything more to Fairy Xingyue. He turned his head and said to a Confucian cultivator standing respectfully in the distance, You will control the flying boat for me. This? Dongfang Yushan was a little hesitant. At this moment, the flying boat shook violently, and sparks appeared at the tail of the flying boat. It was the flying crane immortal beast's fire pillar that hit the flying boat. Junior's true chi is limited and my cultivation is shallow. It is difficult for me to control this imperial equipment. Dongfang Yushan no longer hesitated and said loudly, Moreover, there are so many immortal beasts chasing after the flying boat. If the flying boat is even a moment slower, we will all die. If I tell you to activate it, then activate it. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Suji's tone was indifferent as he glanced at Dongfang Yushan. Dongfang Yushan's heart trembled. He hurriedly stepped forward and said, Yes, I understand. I will ask Shimen Hingyue and the other disciples to come and help. As you wish. Suji nodded. Then, he released his thought and looked at Xiaohua. When Xiaohua saw the flying boat approaching, he raised his arms and waved them. At the same time, he pointed at the meteor belt. Suji curled his lips. He naturally understood that Xiaohua was indicating his importance and reminding him not to abandon him here. Suji turned his head to look at the approaching celestial kite beast, then looked down at the flying boat. He nodded at Fairy Xingyu. His whole body glowed with silver light again, and his figure turned into a thunderbolt and rushed down the flying boat. When Dongfang Yushan, Shimen Hingyue, and the other disciples of the four great families saw the silver light flashing on Suji's body and the immortal's pressure, there was not much surprise in their eyes. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was to report to their sects as soon as they returned from Star Moon Palace. On these 3 continents, there were immortals from the immortal world, and there was more than one immortal. Suji descended from the flying boat, turning into an arc in the sky as he flew towards Xiaohua. Seeing that he was still several hundred feet away, Suji raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Kacha. A layer of blue lightning appeared in the void around Xiaohua. This lightning was like a giant hand, grabbing Xiaohua in an instant. Then, Suji's figure flashed, and he charged towards the sky again. In just a moment, the flying boat in the sky had already passed over Suji's head. Suji and Xiaohua were exposed in front of thousands of celestial kite beasts again. Aogg. The strange cries of the celestial kite beasts not only caused Suji's figure to sway slightly, but even Xiaohua's Naiwen palace was filled with sparks. Woo-woo. Following the cries of the celestial kite beasts, hundreds of fire pillars fell from the sky. Before the fire pillars could get close, the space where Xiaohua was already filled with an inexplicable sticky liquid. The space was about to collapse from the heat. Seeing this, Xiaohua's liver and gallbladder were torn apart. He knew in his heart that even if he used all his soul power at this time, he would not be able to escape from this large-scale attack. Roar. At this moment of life and death, he heard Suji's roar and the silver light around him shone brightly. Xiaohua felt a strong force in the air near him. Then, the entire space was like a wave crashing toward him. His figure flashed and landed on the flying boat. Suji! Before Xiaohua could stabilize himself, Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded, her tone full of panic. It's okay. Although Suji's voice was weak, he was very calm. Because the flying boat was attacked by the celestial kite beasts one after another, the Confucian cultivators, who were flustered, immediately calmed down. Listen to Xiaohua. After Su Ji finished speaking, he took out a pill from his arms and put it in his mouth. He did not say anything else. Looking at the silver light again, he saw blood with black flesh flowing out. Xiaohua stood on the flying boat and stabilized himself slightly. He immediately said to Fairy Xingyu, Senior, don't worry about the meteor belt. You go and control the flying boat. We will fly out of the space fragment first. Okay. Although Fairy Xingyu was worried about Su Ji, she could not do anything when she saw Su Ji healing himself. She agreed and flew to where Dongfang Yushan and the others were and replaced them. Disciples of aristocratic families. Xiaohua looked at Dongfang Yushan and the others and said, You must have some secret techniques that can be used here. Now, there is no need to hold back. Take them out. Go to the stern and block the celestial kite beasts. Dongfang Yushan and the others looked at each other and nodded. Yes, Senior. Then, Xiaohua walked to the front of the flying boat and opened his delusion breaker Dharma Eye to take a closer look. Previously, under the attacks of the celestial kite beasts, the defense of the stern of the flying boat had been broken, and the entire flying boat was shaking. At this time, Fairy Xingyu stabilized the flying boat. Although its speed did not increase, with the help of many Confucian cultivators, the flying boat finally stabilized. Senior, that triangular fragment. Xiaohua looked at it for a few seconds and pointed to a space fragment in the middle of the distance without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu was slightly stunned. She said in a low voice, Xiaohua, according to my previous experience, the oval-shaped space fragment furthest away is the most suitable. Then there is the linear fragment on the left. That triangular fragment. Although the distance is suitable, it is the most dangerous one. We are all seriously injured now. We can't take the risk. Senior, listen to me. Although Xiaohua said, Senior, his tone was unquestionable. He replied without hesitation. Fairy Xingyu frowned and reminded him. Xiaohua, I know you can see some clues, but I also have a magical power that you don't know about. I think the oval-shaped fragment is the best. Senior Su said to listen to me. Xiaohua's tone was firm. There was no room for negotiation. Fairy Xingyu glanced at Su Ji, who was sitting in the distance, and her heart ached. She instantly understood why Su Ji had not let her control the flying boat when he had come out, and why he had not let the Confucian cultivators of the Dongfang family go to the stern to resist the celestial kite beasts. Forget it. At most, I will die here. Fairy Xingyu was a little sad. She thought to herself, when I encountered the thousands of celestial kite beasts, didn't I also want to die? Now that this meteor belt has inexplicably appeared, I have a chance of survival. Why should I be so stubborn? After Fairy Xingyu admitted defeat, the flying boat began to adjust its direction. Although Xiaohua did not look at Fairy Xingyu, he raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw the flying boat adjust its direction. He was a little surprised, because he was still waiting for Fairy Xingyu to get angry. At this time, the huge heavenly mansion had completely disappeared. The whole earth seemed to have been torn apart by a big hand. Moreover, the tearing force of this big hand was getting stronger, and the speed of the earth cracking was getting faster. Seeing a faint golden light appear in his Dharma eye, Xiaohua understood that the golden light was the boundary of this space fragment. As long as the flying boat rushed out of this boundary, it would be considered as completely escaping from this murderous fragment of the immortal realm. Boom! At this time, the flying boat shook violently again. More than a dozen celestial kite beasts broke through the attacks of the Confucian cultivators and directly attacked the flying boat. Senior! Xiaohua was anxious. Put in more effort. It's easy for you to say that. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, You hid in the heavenly mansion to rest. I fought my way back with Su Ji, yes. Senior, you have worked hard, Xiaohua said with a smile. Aren't we at the end? We are just one step away. What are you talking about? Is this how you talk to your senior? Fairy Xingyu seemed to be a little angry. Xiaohua suddenly realized that it was inappropriate to say this in front of Fairy Xingyu. He unconsciously stuck out his tongue and did not dare to say anything more. Oh! At this time, the cries of two celestial kite beasts sounded from both sides of the flying boat. Fairy Xingyu was shocked and did not dare to say anything more to Xiaohua. She hurriedly urged the flying boat to rush into the ground. Chapter 45-26. Good! Seeing the flying boat pass through the golden light, Xiaohua's heart immediately calmed down. He secretly cheered, but just as he was about to open his mouth, he heard, "Oh!" Two more beast cries rang out. The two immortal kites actually broke through the golden light and pounced towards the flying boat at the same time. Damn it! Xiaohua was surprised, but he did not panic. True Qi flowed out of his body as he waved his arms outside the flying boat. Two huge fists appeared in front of the flying jade immortal beast's sharp claws. The golden fist met the sharp claws of the flying crane immortal beasts. Boom boom! Two loud explosions sounded. At the same time that the golden light shattered, the two flying crane immortal beasts were also sent tumbling away. Ha! Xiaohua howled. This is awesome! As he spoke, Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed something in his pocket. After that, he tossed it towards the back of the flying ship. Rumble! The jade talismans that were refined using natural primordial water exploded one after another. Even though not every single one of them was able to injure the flying ship, they were still able to resist the flying ship's attacks. Of course, Xiaohua's attack was just a drop in the bucket. The flying jade immortal beasts that had rushed out of the spatial fragment were still tightly chasing after the flying boat. Moreover, even more flying jade immortal beasts were enraged and began to flap their wings madly to chase after the flying boat. Senior! Xiaohua flew in front of Fairy Xingyu and complained. How can these flying jade immortal beasts fly out of the spatial fragment? Can't those spatial restrictions stop them? Fairy Xingyu rolled her eyes at Xiaohua and said, Who told you that the immortal beasts and demonic beasts in the spatial fragment can't come out? Since when did the spatial fragment have restrictions? Okay. Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Senior, go and rest for a while. Leave this to me. You. Fairy Xingyu was a little worried. Xiaohua smiled and said proudly, I'm a human Mahayana realm cultivator. In the spatial fragment of the immortal realm, I was weak. How can I still be a scholar here? This is the immortal imperial equipment of the heavenly court. Fairy Xingyu reminded him. Even the direct disciples of the four great families can't control it very well. Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said with a smile, Then Junior will give it a try. If there's anything inappropriate, how about Senior immediately take over? Fairy Xingyu was also exhausted at this time and had been desperately holding on. Although they had already rushed out of the fragment of the immortal realm, the flying boat had already fallen into the meteor belt, and there were thousands of immortal phalanx beasts chasing after them. Xiaohua was the only Taoist Grand Ascension stage cultivator on the flying boat who was not injured, so who else could she rely on but him? Come on! Fairy Xingyuan nodded. However, she didn't dare to withdraw her celestial qi. She still kept half of it. Xiaohua stood where Fairy Xingyue was and looked around. The flying boat was in imminent danger. Not to mention that the defense of the entire flying boat had been breached. The flying jade immortal beasts near the flying boat had also begun to accumulate power, preparing to spit out fire pillars. The corners of Xiaohua's mouth curled up as he activated the 5 Qis unification genuine Qi in his middle dantian. Boom! As the golden light around Xiaohua shone brightly, 5 colored clouds rushed into the flying boat under his feet like a waterfall. Buzz, buzz, buzz! The entire airship let out an ear-piercing roar. Then, on the airship, with Xiaohua as the center, 5 colored rings of light rotated like a windmill. In just a moment, the entire airship was dyed red. Shwa! Like the finishing touch of a divine brush, 5 colored clouds rushed out from both sides of the airship and instantly protected the airship. Boom! At this moment, another flying jade immortal beast pounced from the bottom of the flying boat, and the fire pillar hit the flying boat. As soon as the fire pillar came into contact with the flying boat, the 5 colored clouds immediately dissipated. However, as the fire pillar was annihilated, the clouds continued to surge and quickly protected the flying boat. Roar! The flying jade immortal beast roared and flew again, smashing its huge tail at the flying boat. Unfortunately, as soon as it swung its tail, the flying boat flashed past and rushed out faster than light. Where the tail landed, the flying boat was nowhere to be seen. Boom! The flying jade immortal beast's tail did not miss. It hit another flying jade immortal beast that swooped down on the opposite side. Caught off guard, the flying jade immortal beast was shot down 1,000 feet. It was only 1,000 feet, but life and death were decided. The invisible boundary hurricane blew down and slashed diagonally on the flying jade immortal beast's tail. The huge tail flashed with crimson light and layers of marks appeared. As soon as the marks appeared, they quickly dispersed and clusters of runes rushed out. Boom! In the void, an inexplicable aura gushed out. However, as soon as this aura appeared, it was blown away by the boundary hurricane. Then, with a crisp cracking sound, the flying jade immortal beast's tail broke into several pieces. Roar! The flying jade immortal beast seemed to be in pain and lost its balance. It spread its wings again and wanted to fly up. Unfortunately, as soon as the wings landed, the boundary hurricane came out again. With a loud rumble, the wings that were almost bone were also broken. The flying jade immortal beast fell diagonally into the hurricane. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Faint sounds of wind could be heard as the kite immortal beast howled in pain. Its powerful body seemed to have been pinched by a giant hand, and its bones were crushed one by one. When the kite immortal beast's body was completely crushed, it fell another few thousand feet and was hit by an even fiercer realm storm. Awu! The kite immortal beast weakly groaned a few times before a bloody light appeared. The kite immortal beast was neatly cut into dozens of pieces of flesh and blood. These pieces of flesh only fell a few dozen feet before they were blown away by the realm storm and turned into nothingness. Roar! When a flying jade immortal beast was killed by the boundary hurricane, more flying jade immortal beasts rushed over from all directions and pounced on the flying boat. The loud whistling of the wind and the roaring of the flying boat had already covered the screams. Not many flying jade immortal beasts could see the blood of the dead. They only had eyes for the delicious flesh of the human race. Looking at the flying boat again, it did not directly rush towards the triangular space fragment, as Fairy Xingyu had expected. Instead, it soared rapidly in the nearby space, like a proud phoenix spreading its colorful wings and dancing among the many ferocious beasts. Thousands of flying jade immortal beasts covered the nearby meteor belt. They roared and pounced on the flying boat, but the fire pillars and sharp claws missed the flying boat every time. Not to mention the disciples of the scholarly cultivator families who were frightened and pale. Even Fairy Xingyu, who was adjusting her breath with her eyes closed, had a slight change in expression. Seeing that the flying jade immortal beasts were angered by his provocation, Xiaohua laughed loudly. The golden light around him soared into the sky again. The flying boat shook again and flew in a spiral toward the triangular space fragment in the meteor belt. Roar! A group of flying jade immortal beasts roared crazily and chased after the flying boat. Unfortunately, they had only flown a few hundred feet when the mysterious boundary hurricane immediately attacked. The powerful flying jade immortal beasts were squashed one by one and torn apart when they fell to the ground. Seeing this, the flying jade immortal beasts who were close to the flying boat panicked and began to flee left and right. However, the more they fled, the more they were killed. The flying jade immortal beasts behind them did not know what was going on. They still chased after Xiaohua's flying boat. Just like before, after another 1,000 feet, countless blood clots were scattered again. The entire meteor belt was filled with blood mist. So this is what he's planning. Upon seeing Xiaohua fly towards the triangular spatial fragment, and kill a large number of flying crane immortal beasts every time he zigzagged for 10,000 feet, Fairy Xingyu finally understood. Although it's a little difficult to fly over this triangular spatial fragment, there are many realm tornadoes along the way. The thousands of flying jade immortal beasts will chase us endlessly. If we don't kill them in this meteor belt, we won't have a chance in the future. If we lead them to the triangular space fragment, we won't have a chance of survival. Even the triangular space fragment will become a land of death in the future. However, thinking of this, Fairy Xingyu deliberately turned her head and saw that the fragment of the immortal realm had turned into several irregular fragments. These fragments were still splitting and shrinking. It wouldn't be long before they completely turned into stardust and disappeared in the meteor belt. However, if these flying jade immortal beasts don't fly out of the space fragment, I think. Alas, there's nothing to think about. These flying jade immortal beasts are ferocious beasts in the immortal realm. They are extremely powerful and have the power to fly out of the space fragment. If they are lucky enough to fly to the other side of the meteor belt, I'm afraid all the human clan cultivators and great demons of the demon clan will be killed. While Fairy Xingyu was thinking, Xiaohua steered the flying boat and flew for more than 10,000 feet. At this time, the flying boat was much closer to the triangular space fragment. A faint fragrance began to emerge in the space around the flying boat. After the flying boat, there were no more flying jade immortal beasts that could safely chase after them. The hundreds of flying jade immortal beasts closest to them were being killed by the boundary hurricanes. After this slaughter, thousands of flying jade immortal beasts, who were panicking like headless flies, began to flee in all directions toward the meteor belt in the face of death. Hundreds of them even wanted to return to the space fragment of the immortal realm. Unfortunately, what greeted them was only the cruelty of heaven and earth. What greeted them was only the resentment of the human clan cultivators they had killed earlier. They had no choice but to die. Seeing the flying jade immortal beasts being killed one by one, Fairy Xingyu's heart finally calmed down. Calmly, she smelled a strange fragrance near the flying boat. Fairy Xingyu seemed to have thought of something. A smile appeared on her face and she closed her eyes. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu cultivated quietly. Xiaohua activated his golden body and 5 Qis unifications. He opened his delusion breaker Dharma Eye and focused on controlling the immortal imperial equipment. The disciples of the 4 great families and the other families on the flying boat were dumbfounded. They had seen the power of the flying jade immortal beasts. They had never thought that there would be a human clan cultivator in this world who could easily kill thousands of flying jade immortal beasts. Chapter 45-27. However, they had no choice but to believe it. Moreover, this human Grand Ascension stage cultivator was the creator of the Fortune Gate who had refreshed the entire mysterious yellow list. He was also the person who had unveiled the new era of the 3 continents. In the face of such a human Grand Ascension stage cultivator, their pride and self-confidence were nothing but dust. In the face of such a human cultivator, there was only reverence. Of course, there was only reverence. Dongfang Yushan, Shimen Hingyue, Nangong Pingping, and Baining Qihan looked at the 5-colored light below Xiaohua with shock in their eyes. They looked at each other and exchanged glances. Then, a look of determination appeared in their eyes. Initially, Xiaohua didn't know that the flying crane immortal beasts could fly out of spatial fragments. However, when he was searching for spatial fragments, he still took into account the flying crane immortal beast's pursuit. Just as Xiaohua had expected, when he arrived in front of a triangular spatial fragment, the last flying crane immortal beast had been killed in the meteor belt. He couldn't use his spiritual sense in the meteor belt, but he could slightly release his spiritual sense. The greedy Xiaohua naturally wouldn't let go of the flying crane immortal beast's soul. He had driven the flying boat through the flying crane immortal beast's pack not only to provoke the flying crane immortal beast's anger, but also to search for its soul. There. Fairy Xingyu, who was meditating, didn't turn around when she heard the cries stop. She only looked at the approaching triangular spatial fragment and pointed in a certain direction. All right. Xiaohua smiled and urged the flying boat to fly in the direction Fairy Xingyu had pointed out. After flying for thousands of feet, the triangular starlight of the space fragment changed. Under the starlight, clusters of clouds gushed out like willow catkins. The starlight also showed 5 colors at this time. Amidst the starlight, clouds covered the starlight, and a flower-like halo gradually bloomed as Xiaohua urged the flying boat to speed up. The direction that Fairy Xingyu was pointing to was one of the petals of the flower. Naturally, Xiaohua had also smelled the exotic fragrance. A tranquil mood arose spontaneously. The golden body that had been activated due to the fierce battle gradually faded away, and the delusion breaker Dharma eyes, which had been opened painfully, also slowly closed. As the airboat crashed into the halo, Xiaohua felt a flash in front of his eyes. Then, an indescribably wonderful scene appeared in front of his eyes. It was a world of flowers. The entire land was covered with flower buds of various colors. Some were purple, some were red, and some were yellow. All kinds of colors bloomed beautifully on the land. All kinds of flowers on the ground were also covered in gorgeous colors. Green vines intertwined between the flowers. Even though the vines looked like they were covered in thorns, there were still bits and pieces of Xiaohua's naughty blooming. Looking at the left side of the airboat, there were layers of colorful clouds in the sky, which also looked like flowers. Inexplicable heavenly light fell on these colorful clouds, and wisps of brilliance gushed out from the clouds. An even more refined flowery appearance filled the entire sky. Swoosh! It seemed to be the sound of the wind, but it also seemed to be the sound of rain. Sweet and soft sounds came from all around, like a low melody. Xiaohua couldn't help but withdraw his genuine qi and carefully remove the defense of the airboat, allowing the fine rain to fall on his body, face, and eyebrows. The wind was fragrant, and the rain was sweet. In the hazy drizzle, the whole world began to be intoxicated. What he liked the most was the sound of a clear spring flowing in the wind and rain. The pure sound fell into everyone's ears. Although no one had seen the spring water, they could already imagine how clear the spring water was. The cool breeze rose again, and thousands of branches and leaves rustled in the wind. It was as if they were singing, and also as if they were dancing. In just a moment, the singing had already filled the entire space, and the dance had already covered the earth. Xiaohua stood there for a long time, looking at the ground that seemed to have been washed by water. The gorgeous flowers were like smiling faces. The drizzle didn't wet his body, but his heart was already wet. He took a long breath of the moist air, and a cool feeling instantly spread all over his body. It turns out that the world can be so beautiful. Xiaohua couldn't help but murmur. It's so beautiful that I don't want to disturb it. Xiaohua, who had always taken advantage of every opportunity, had the rare thought of letting Xiaohua out at this time. Xiaohua! At this time, Fairy Xingyu opened her eyes, looked at the intoxicated Xiaohua, and said with a smile, "What do you think of this space fragment?" "Beautiful." Xiaohua thought for a moment, and only said this word. It seemed that he had already remembered the word literary in his mind. Only this word could represent his mood. Fairy Xingyu didn't comment. She raised her hand and pointed at the road. "Do you see the flower path on the ground?" Xiaohua lowered his head. Sure enough, among the thousands of flowers, there was a seemingly winding path. It passed through the flower field, slanted over the high slope, and disappeared into the dreamlike rain and fog. "Just fly along this flower path." After Fairy Xingyu finished speaking, she closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing again. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. Although he was reluctant to give up the beautiful scenery, he still urged the flying boat and released his divine sense. He carefully took precautions and flew along the flower path into the distance. After flying for a while, Xiaohua had already sensed the awe-inspiring qi in this space fragment. He understood that this must be a fragment of some Confucian cultivation world. Seeing Xiaohua urging the flying boat in front of them, Dongfang Yushan and the other disciples of the aristocratic families didn't dare to disturb him. After waiting for a few hours, a rare mountain ridge appeared in front of the flying boat. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over it, and he couldn't help but be surprised. When Xiaohua urged the flying boat to land on the mountain ridge, a dazzling meteor belt appeared in front of everyone's eyes again. Xiaohua looked at Fairy Xingyu, who had a strange smile on her face, and asked curiously, Senior, how did you find the exit of the space fragment so easily? Could this be an illusion? Hee hee. Fairy Xingyu enjoyed Xiaohua's surprise very much. She covered her mouth and laughed. Who told you that you have to fight to the death in every space fragment? Actually, to be honest, we didn't come to the Star Moon Palace to risk our lives. Many space fragments are as quiet and peaceful as this flower realm. There's no need for dermic powers, divine abilities, or even flying. As long as you walk obediently, you'll definitely find the exit. Otherwise, how could I let the Star Moon Palace be a reward from Jiaxing Lu? Xiaohua, who was used to seeing bloody trials, smiled bitterly. He shook his head, flew up from the flying boat, and placed his hands behind his back. There were no clouds under his feet as he slowly landed among the flowers. Although his feet were a little muddy, Xiaohua didn't mind. Instead, he walked step by step. With a glance, another kind of feeling was born in his heart. It was as if he had suddenly returned to the sea of flowers tens of thousands of years ago. In that pavilion, there was a beautiful woman, 2 fiery hearts, 3 cups of heartless wine, and 4 affectionate eyes. Is she okay? The flowers turned into a person again. The beautiful, strong, gentle, and generous Xin. Xiaohua could leave freely, but on the flying boat, how many dared to leave? Dong Fan Yushan and the others stood there respectfully, not daring to say a word. You all can go too. It's rare to encounter this flower realm, and there might not be another one in the future. Enjoy the beautiful scenery here. Don't let down God's good intentions. Fairy Xingyu suddenly opened her eyes. On her face, which couldn't be seen clearly, droplets of rain had condensed into water droplets, falling along the silver light on her face. If one wasn't careful, one would mistake these water droplets for tears. Dong Fan Yushan and the others were puzzled, but they didn't dare to refute. After respectfully agreeing, they flew out of the flying boat one after another. Then, according to the aristocratic families, they flew to different places. By the way, don't damage the flowers here. Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded in everyone's ears at the same time. Every flower here has a story, and every petal has a memory. You can't afford to pay for it. Yes, we understand. Everyone was even more puzzled. However, when they looked at Suji and Fairy Xingyu, who were sitting on the flying boat, they became thoughtful. Of course, it was really difficult for ordinary people to not touch the flowers. However, it was easy for these disciples of the aristocratic families of Confucian cultivators. They only needed to urge the clouds slightly to ensure that they wouldn't get close to the flowers. Naturally, they wouldn't damage the flowers. However, how could such a beautiful scenery be compared to the beautiful scenery in Xiaohua's eyes? Seeing that the disciples of the aristocratic families were following the rules, Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly. She retracted her gaze and looked at Suji, who was not far away, whose silver light had begun to fade. Her eyes were filled with sweetness. She whispered, Suji, it seems that your divination skill is really useful. We've searched for the flower realm several times, but we didn't encounter it. Xiaohua actually came in again by accident. With that, Fairy Xingyu floated up and walked to the side of the flying boat. Looking at the beautiful land, she didn't care if Suji could hear her. She continued, Do you remember the ecstasy we felt when we first discovered the Star Moon Palace? Do you remember the surprise we felt when we first came to this flower realm? I really didn't expect that there would be such a world of flowers in this world. For this kind of beauty, there would be no towering trees, no huge mountains that would destroy this beauty, and no wild beasts that would destroy these flowers. How could I not remember? Suji's voice, which had always been calm, was now filled with a strange emotion. It was in this field of flowers that my hand, which had always been in charge of punishing immortal weapons, actually plucked a flower. Although this flower withered as soon as it was inserted into your hair, that moment of youth had long been engraved in my heart. I knew that from now on, not to mention the disputes in the immortal world, not to mention staying in the mortal world forever, even if the immortal 3 decays, my heart would not be defeated. Suji. Suji's words were 100 times more potent than any poison in the world. In an instant, Fairy Xingyu had been poisoned. Not only was her heart broken, but her eyes were also tired. Even her immortal body was weak. Chapter 45-28. Fairy Xingyu's mouth was filled with a sweet fragrance that was comparable to the sweetness of the flower realm. Her languid voice was a little greasy, and her eyes were moist. She looked at Suji and said in a low voice, You can actually say such shameful things. I thought you were like heavenly thunder, only upright and cold. I still remember you carefully burying the withered flower in the soil with heartache. I also remember you saying that when we came back, we would go and see the new flower together. However, it's been a long time since then. Even if there were more than 10 flowers, they would have withered, let alone one. Don't worry, Suji. I've already seen it. The flowers have grown again. The flowers are different, but my feelings are still the same. Fairy Xingyu was a little flustered. She hurriedly said, as if she was confessing her feelings. Yes. Suji did not show his appearance. He only said in the silver light, There are many female cultivators who love flowers, but I've never seen a female cultivator who buried flowers. Xingyu, although you are strong, bad-tempered, unyielding in your words, and even have many schemes in your heart, just seeing you bury flowers is like seeing a real Xingyu. I think you may be the person I should meet in this life. Humph. Fairy Xingyu pouted and said with a smile, Have you met many female cultivators? I thought your story of burying flowers was already a very sad and beautiful story. But looking at Xiaohua now, I seem to see an even more sad and beautiful picture. I think Xiaohua is also a person with a story in his heart. Suji did not know whether he was intentional or not, but he brought the topic to Xiaohua again. Xingyu Fairy seemed unwilling to break the sweetness at this time. She also nodded and said, You're right. According to the records in the Hall of Heroes, Xiaohua doesn't have a dual cultivation partner. This makes me feel very strange. Suji immediately thought of Jiuxia, who was mentioned by Xiaohua. He was about to speak, but he felt that it was inappropriate, so he did not continue. Fairy Xingyu said again, However, it is said that he met a female cultivator named Li Jing at the Jade Pavilion conference. Later, the two of them traveled together for a while and went their separate ways. Oh, and... At this point, Fairy Xingyu actually looked around, lowered her voice, and said with a smile, I also have an extremely secret news. Xiaohua seems to have colluded with the 9th princess of Immortal Emperor Go Qin. How is that possible? Suji scoffed without even thinking about it. I'm afraid you're just guessing. Darling Su, you must trust the intuition of a female cultivator. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. Although there is no such news in the world, I can still see some clues from the time when Xiaohua disappeared and the place and time when the new princess appeared. What's more, didn't you see that the flying boat that Xiaohua just used is the Heavenly Court's Immortal Imperial equipment? If Xiaohua doesn't understand the 5 Qis unification technique, how can he activate it? This has nothing to do with the new princess, right? Suji smiled bitterly. Fairy Xingyu blinked mischievously and said with a smile, How about I tell him the news that the new princess has been suppressed and see his reaction? Humph, if there is no Confucian family here, you can just say it. Suji warned. If you say it in front of them, won't you be causing trouble for Xingyu? I know. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. I'll just send a voice transmission. At this point, Fairy Xingyu's smile slowly disappeared. She looked into the distance and said, The Dongfang family really can't hold back anymore. Dongfang Yushan has gone to find Xiaohua. Xingyu. Suji suddenly said, Let's not talk about these mundane things. I remember the last time you came to the flower realm. Putting aside the fact that the two immortals were greatly moved by the fragmented space, Dongfang Yushan moved his body and landed beside Xiaohua. He looked at the muddy water on the flower path and frowned slightly. He gritted his teeth and hesitated again. At this time, Xiaohua's voice rang out. You are a disciple of the Dongfang family, right? Why are you looking for me? Dongfang Yushan was overjoyed. He was afraid that Xiaohua would ignore him, so he hurriedly bowed and said, I am Dongfang Yushan, a direct descendant of the Dongfang family. I deserve to die for disturbing Senior's flower viewing. Xiaohua replied indifferently. Since you already know, why bother coming over? To tell you the truth, I'm also a person of culture. Whenever I see beautiful scenery, I'll linger on it. Dongfang Yushan said with a smile. However, I have a question today. If I don't ask Senior, it'll be like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I'll turn a deaf ear to the beautiful scenery in front of me. You're talking about the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification, right? Xiaohua replied, hitting the nail on the head. Yes. Dongfang Yushan didn't expect Xiaohua to be so straightforward. He didn't hide anything at all. When he answered, even his voice trembled a little. Senior, I have the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification. Xiaohua didn't deny it. Instead, he answered truthfully. However, this cultivation method belongs to a good friend of mine. I've only received some guidance from him. And without his approval, I can't tell anyone about this cultivation method. Then, who is Senior's good friend? Where is he? Dongfang Yushan hurriedly asked. My good friend is called Wen Chu. Xiaohua smiled. As for where he is, that's not something I can know. However, when I return to the hidden Immortal mainland, I'm sure he'll hear the news and go to the soaring Dragon Mountain range to find me. That's good. Dongfang Yushan smiled. To be honest, the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification has been lost for a long time. Not to mention the Immortal Palace, even the 4 great families don't have the complete cultivation method. If Senior's good friend can teach the cultivation method of the 5 Qis unification to the 4 great families. When Xiaohua heard this, he immediately waved his hand and said, You don't have to tell me about this. Just look for Wen Chu in the future. Yes. Dongfang Yushan nodded like a chick pecking at rice. I know. What I want to say is that I've already discussed it with the other 3 great families. After your trip to the Star Moon Palace, you must come. Oh no, after we arrive at the Star Moon Palace, we'll definitely ask the family head to send an envoy to invite Senior to the 4 great families. Moreover, if it's possible, I hope that Senior will first accept the invitation from the Dongfang family. As he spoke, Dongfang Yushan carefully took out an exquisite square jade piece and respectfully handed it over. This jade piece was in the shape of a bamboo flower. Every fine line on the bamboo flower was carved with exquisite skill. Under the sunlight, the color of the surrounding flowers was reflected. This jade piece was actually similar to the bamboo flower. Moreover, Xiaohua had no doubt that as long as he activated his true qi and let it fall on this jade piece, this bamboo flower might slowly bloom. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was curious and also self-aware. He was just thinking about Xian from the Immortal Palace. How could he accept the Dongfang family's bamboo flower first? Moreover, not to mention that this bamboo flower was ugly, to send flowers, no matter what, he had to find a female cultivator who was more beautiful than the flowers, more beautiful than the jade, right? How could Xiaohua dare to accept a flower sent by a man? Xiaohua smiled slightly and did not turn around. Instead, he continued to look at the sea of flowers in the distance and said, I've just killed thousands of immortal beasts, and am now using the scenery here to cleanse my mortal heart and murderous nature. Let's talk about these mortal matters later. Yes, this junior understands. Dongfang Yushan was already prepared for Xiaohua's rejection. He didn't think that a supreme grandmaster like him had the right to invite a grand ascension stage human being to the Dongfang family, so he stowed the invitation card away up his sleeve before bidding farewell to Xiaohua and departing. Not only did Dongfang Yushan's actions fall into the eyes of Fairy Xingyu and Shimen Hingyue, but in all fairness, even if they were the ones to go forward, they would also seek greater benefits for their sections. However, they were still relieved that Xiaohua didn't accept the invitation. There was naturally no day or night in the spatial fragment. The sky was neither dark nor dim, and was always so gentle. The entire flower realm was like a huge flower bud, sweet and tranquil. No one knew what the others were thinking, but Xiaohua was minding his own business as he walked through the muddy flower path. He looked very leisurely and at ease. If he were to change into a white scholarly robe, he would look like a distinguished scholar. In particular, Xiaohua's temperament had undergone an indescribable change after peeking into the inheritance of Qingqiu Mountain. He involuntarily exuded the aura of spring amidst a myriad of colors. It was rare for a scholarly family to have a few women, so they would occasionally steal glances at his elegant and distinguished figure from the corner of their eyes. The flower realm wasn't all drizzling. After a few hours, there was wind again. The wind was a little tipsy and blew through the air, either sweeping up some of the flowers or mixing in some of the earth's fragrance. His nose and mouth were a little moist, and the ground beneath his feet was already solid. Looking at the ground in the distance, the flowers were completely translucent with droplets of water. The wind swayed the branches of the flowers, and the droplets of water either fell or slowly evaporated. Wisps of mist had appeared in the flower realm at some point in time. The wind wasn't strong, so it couldn't blow the mist away. Instead, it swept the mist away and gradually dispersed it. The mist was also strange. It didn't fly too high and only covered the flowers. If it was a foot higher, the mist would dissipate. Seeing the mist cover the delicate features of the flowers like a veil, revealing a kind of hazy beauty, Xiaohua was intoxicated. Such a beautiful scene should only exist in the heavens. He didn't know when it would descend to the mortal world. After another few hours, the mist gradually grew thicker. The clouds in the sky seemed to be jealous of the delicate features of the flowers. They tore apart and fell down, filling up the entire world and covering everyone's eyes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just as Xiaohua was pondering what other scenery there was, the sound of rain falling could be heard. First, the raindrops were like stars, drop by drop. Soon after, the raindrops were like threads, entwining endlessly. In the end, the curtain of rain was like a waterfall, pouring down with a ladle. Chapter 45-29. Xiaohua was naturally not afraid of the rain. He squatted down and looked at the nameless orange-red flowers in front of him. These flowers first swayed gently when the rain fell, as if they could not bear the burden. When the rain became heavier, the branches of the flowers also tilted, but the branches seemed to be resisting, straightening from time to time. However, the petals also began to fall. The heavy rain fell like a torrent, splashing loudly. The entire branch of the flowers had completely fallen. The flowers in the rain were very miserable. The petals fell one by one, and the whole ground was covered in fallen petals. The petals floated gloomily in the watery water. How could they be as bright as before? People's hearts always change. There will always be a time when it blooms. Xiaohua's heart felt a little strange. He looked at the sky and wanted to disperse the rain clouds, but after a moment, he sighed and let out a low groan. With a sway of his body, he landed on the flying boat again. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were both satisfied and did not care about the rain. The two of them seemed to be holding hands. Xiaohua turned around and let go. Xiaohua smiled slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw that Su Ji's body was still covered in silver light. His heart sank unconsciously. He frowned and said, "Senior, what about your physical body? Didn't you say that there will always be a time when it blooms?" "There's always a time for flowering," Su Ji said calmly. "It's time for me to change my physical body. Don't worry." "That's good." Su Ji had actually said this before. Xiaohua nodded slightly and said, "According to the Buddhist sect, the physical body is a bag of skin. It's the most burdensome, that's what the Buddhist sect said. It's completely opposite to the path of our Tao sect." Fairy Xingyu said disdainfully, "Try not to change your physical body. I'm afraid you can't even ascend to the immortal world." Of course, Xiaohua was not here to discuss cultivation with Fairy Xingyu. He smiled and looked at Su Ji, saying, "Senior, how did you meet the family of Confucian cultivators?" Su Ji didn't hide anything and told him the whole story, In fact, it was similar to what Xiaohua had thought. While Xiaohua was cleaning up the Yiqiong heavenly residence, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had gone to investigate the exit of the spatial fragment. At the same time, they had also investigated the whereabouts of the flying crane immortal beast. Because their strength was greatly reduced, they were very careful and did not dare to follow the flying crane immortal beast too obviously. Moreover, Fairy Xingyu could not use her star shuttle and had to rely on other secret techniques to find the meteor belt. Therefore, they spent a lot of time in the spatial fragment. Of course, because the exit of the spatial fragment was blocked by the restriction of the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Fairy Xingyu's efforts were destined to be fruitless. However, right when they were feeling dejected, they noticed to their shock that there were numerous flying crane immortal beasts residing in a valley that was extremely far away from the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. There were so many that Su Ji did not dare to investigate carefully. He immediately wanted to take Fairy Xingyu back to the heavenly abode. The two of them were rather secretive, and the flying crane immortal beast did not discover them. However, the two of them had only flown for 100 kilometers when the valley became lively again. Su Ji released his extended thought, and was surprised to find that the disciples of the four great clans and some other Confucian clans had actually bumped into the flying crane immortal beast's warning area. The two of them wanted to go back and save them, but they saw that there were too many disciples of the Confucian clans. It was not something they could save, so the two of them were ready to give up. At this time, the disciples of the Dongfang family actually took out their immortal imperial equipment. The immortal imperial equipment of the heavenly court was somewhat different from the immortal world's immortal equipment. The true chi of the hidden immortal continent could barely be used. Moreover, the immortal imperial equipment could also be used in the immortal world fragment. Seeing this, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu naturally had to go back and save them. However, even if the two of them rescued many disciples of the Confucian clans and used their immortal imperial equipment to escape from the valley where the flying crane immortal beast was, they had successfully lured thousands of flying crane immortal beasts out. In the absence of an exit, Su Ji had no other place to escape. He could only rush back to the Yiqiong heavenly mansion and bring Xiaohua along. Naturally, they did not expect that they would meet Xiaohua, the immortal Xiaohua, who was good at creating miracles. Before they could see the shadow of the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, the entire immortal world fragment shook. Then, a strong restriction fluctuation rushed out from the heavenly mansion. Of course, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu knew that there was a change in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. They were overjoyed. As long as the restriction of the heavenly mansion was triggered, they could hide in the heavenly mansion. Naturally, they would not be afraid of the flying crane immortal beast's attack. Unfortunately, their joy was that they were too close to leaving the heavenly mansion. When they saw the heavenly mansion, the shadow of the starry sky, and the meteor belt, they knew that the door of life had been opened for them. Unfortunately, in order to save the disciples of the Confucian clans, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had used too much immortal spirit qi. They could not rely on their physical bodies to absorb immortal spirit qi from the space fragment. When they saw hope, they were already at the end of their rope. At that time, even if Su Ji did not go down to save Xiaohua, he would definitely not be able to hold on until he used the immortal imperial equipment to fly into the meteor belt. Fortunately, Su Ji sacrificed his physical body to bring Xiaohua onto the flying ship. Xiaohua, who was good at creating miracles, naturally brought the immortal imperial equipment to the flower realm. "Sigh, it's too dangerous," Xiaohua sighed. He knew that this fragment of the immortal world was different from the ruins. Even if he did not hide his cultivation base, and used the forbidden power of the immortal world as a soul cultivator, and sent out his clones, he was afraid that he would not be a match for the flying crane immortal beast. Of course, Reverend Yun's Pangu axe could be effective. Unfortunately, Yun only had the strength of one axe. Not to mention that he had not fully recovered, Reverend Yun could not resist thousands of flying crane immortal beasts. Su Ji heard and said faintly, "The flying crane immortal beast is a famous ferocious beast in the immortal world. Only a vitality-gathering immortal can defeat it." Speaking of vitality-gathering immortal, Suji realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. He hurriedly covered it up and said, "Even if there were 10 of you at the Mahayana realm, you would not be a match for thousands of flying crane immortal beasts." "Yes, yes, I know." Xiaohua nodded and said with a smile, "I just feel a little guilty that I did not do anything." "Didn't you kill a flying crane immortal beast in the heavens abode?" Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. "Could it be that you're still hiding your strength?" "Well, I do have some." Xiaohua could not bear to see Suji like this and confessed. Unexpectedly, Suji interrupted Xiaohua and said, "That's because I don't allow you to use it. You don't have to blame yourself." "All right." Seeing this, Fairy Xingyu straightened up and stretched. She said with a smile, "If you don't want me to say it, then I won't say it. However, this trip to the Star Moon Palace is really unfavorable. We haven't even flown out of the meteor belt, and we've already encountered so many dangers. I think it's a good thing," Suji said. "In the future, if we don't come to the Star Moon Palace, the disciples of the 3 continents will also have scruples and not dare to come in casually. Moreover, if we don't pass through the space fragments of the Immortal Realm, how can we come to the Flower Realm? The first time we entered the Star Moon Palace, we were lucky enough to enter the Flower Realm. The last time we entered the Star Moon Palace, we entered the Flower Realm again. This kind of opportunity is really rare." Fairy Xingyu smiled sweetly and did not say much. At this time, silence spoke louder than words. Seeing that the rain was gradually getting lighter, Xiaohua pointed at the meteor belt and asked, "Fairy, where should we go now?" "I don't know either. I'll follow your arrangements," Fairy Xingyu said lazily. "The meteor belt is changing. The last time we went out of the Flower Realm, we fell into a pillar-shaped space fragment. This time, there is no pillar-shaped space fragment in this meteor belt. How would I know where to go? You can see the turbulence in the realm, and we have the immortal Imperial equipment under us. Everything is ready, so I don't have to worry." "All right." Xiaohua nodded. He forced himself to open the delusion breaker eye for a moment, then pointed at the curve-like space fragment and said, "Then we'll fly to that space fragment." Then, Xiaohua sent a voice transmission to Dongfang Yushan and the other disciples of the Confucian aristocratic family to return to the flying boat. He did not discuss with them and activated the flying boat again. At this time, the rain in the Flower Realm suddenly stopped, and the clouds dispersed. Inexplicable light sprinkled down again, and the broken flower branches tenaciously stretched out again. Little bits of colorful light once again emerged from the ground. In the colorful light, hundreds of millions of flower buds protruded out. Presumably, it would not be long before the entire flower realm would be a world of flowers again. However, Xiaohua did not have time to take another look at this splendid new world. He had already activated the flying boat and left this world that was one of the few worlds that Xiaogua had not plundered. The beautiful scenery of the past few hours had turned into a permanent memory in his heart. Perhaps he would come again at some point in time. However, he probably would not be alone to admire the scenery. He would probably bring along a confidant to spend such a beautiful time with him. The curve-like space fragment looked very close, but after activating the flying boat, they actually flew for more than an hour before arriving. After rushing into the halo of the space fragment, what hung above Xiaohua and the others was a barren continent. There were some strange beasts on this continent, as well as some innate restrictions. Xiaohua even sensed a familiar primordial wave on this continent. Needless to say, this continent was a lost corner of the primordial world. Of course, this primordial world was only a fragment, and could not be compared to the previous Divine Land ruins. The strange beasts inside were only about the 5th grade origin energy. Xiaohua did not need to do anything. As long as some disciples of the 4 aristocratic families acted, they could drive these strange beasts away. On the primordial world fragment, Xiaohua's divine telekinesis was also useful. Therefore, it was not too troublesome for Xiaohua to find the exit of the space fragment. Moreover, when he faced the meteor belt again, Xiaohua was already more cautious. The first immortal world fragment to enter was a hexagonal plane fragment. Then, the flower boundary was a triangular three-dimensional fragment. Now, the primordial world fragment they were in was a curve. Therefore, Xiaohua already had a feeling that whether the interface's level was high or not was reflected in the shape of the fragment. Perhaps, the higher the level of the interface, the simpler the fragment's shape would be. On the other hand, the lower the level of the interface, the more complicated the fragment's shape would be. Therefore, when Xiaohua was selecting a space fragment, he intentionally looked for three-dimensional fragments. Even if there were no safe three-dimensional fragments, he would rather look for simple linear fragments. If there were no three-dimensional fragments, Xiaohua might as well wait. In any case, Xiaohua did not want to go to a space like the Immortal World fragment again. Chapter 45-30. Sure enough, Xiaohua deliberately chose a space fragment that was very complicated and almost shapeless. It was like a cotton cloud. When he got inside, there were no flowers or plants in the space, let alone strange beasts. There were only mountains, seawater, and a strange climate. Xiaohua drove the flying boat to fly in this space. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, it was struck by lightning 10 times, encountered hailstones, heavy rain 7 times, and snow 6 times. Of course, such a bad climate was just a simple test for cultivators. It could not stop Xiaohua and the others from going further and further in the meteor belt. The situation after that was needless to say. Under Xiaohua's leadership, the flying boat passed through more than a dozen space fragments in succession. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were surprised, and even the disciples of the Confucian families were amazed. This was because these fragments were either filled with seawater, vast wilderness, continuous mountains, lost human tribe domains, dilapidated Buddhist temples, or barbarian continents where demonic beasts roamed. There were even 2 inexplicable voids. These voids did not have the transmission channel that Fairy Xingyu had mentioned. They were completely composed of thunder, lightning, and clouds. There was no land, no sea, no humans, and no beasts. However, it was also strange. The dozens of spaces that Xiaohua passed through were not particularly dangerous. Along the way, they were quite free. However, when the flying boat rushed into a space covered with green vines again, Fairy Xingyu could not help but say, "Spiritual Master Xiao, are you here to play in the meteor belt? Or do you want to pass through the meteor belt? If you want to play here, I'll let the female disciples of the Confucian families play with you, okay? When you're done playing, how about you take us out of this meteor belt? Elder sister!" Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Do you think I'm playing? Don't you think I'm racking my brains to find a way out?" "I don't see it," Fairy Xingyu replied. "I just see you flying around comfortably. Back then, when I took the disciples of the Star-Picking Tower into the Star-Moon Palace, we only passed through 4 or 5 space fragments to reach the other side of the meteor belt. Look at you, there are more than a dozen space fragments, but you haven't seen the edge of the meteor belt. And what do you want me to say about you? I've passed through the meteor belt many times. Apart from the flower realm, I've seen more than 10 spatial fragments that you've passed through. Why haven't I seen any of these spatial fragments before? Big sister, there are millions of spatial fragments in this meteor belt. There are also millions of paths leading to the other side of the meteor belt. Does the path that I choose have to be the one that you have walked on?" Xiaohua pressed down on the flying boat and stopped in midair. He turned around and smiled. "Don't you think that the path this junior has chosen is very safe? You still have the nerve to say it's safe." When it came to safety, Fairy Xingyu laughed and retorted, "I never thought that I would almost die in the meteor belt. Then, there's nothing I can do." Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders. He raised his head and looked at the green vines that covered the sky and said, "Why don't you drive the flying boat and pass through the meteor belt?" "Xingyu." Suji frowned and said, "Don't use people you don't suspect. Now that Xiaohua is driving the airboat, let him make his own decision." "Suji." Fairy Xingyu raised her eyebrows and said, "Take a look. Where did he drive the flying boat to? This is probably a fragment of the 10,000 demon realm. This is a space that we have never seen before, right? If we let him fly like this, how long will it take for us to pass through the meteor belt? Well, presumably your injury has been controlled. Suji nodded. If possible, you can drive the flying boat. I won't drive the flying boat. Fairy Xingyue pouted. Let Xiaohua drive the flying boat. When we reach the exit of the space, I will choose the spatial fragment. I see. Suji nodded and looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua, what do you think? Xiaohua's mind did not seem to be in the conversation between the two. At this time, when he heard Suji's words, he came back to his senses and said, Of course. However, this junior wants to stay in this space for a while. If possible, let Dongfang Yushan and the others drive the flying boat first. Senior can guide them to the exit of the spatial fragment, and wait for this junior there for a while? What's the matter? Suji was a little puzzled and looked around and asked. Xiaohua smiled and looked at the disciples of the Confucian family in the distance who did not dare to approach. He whispered, Junior still wants to return to the Dawn Rain continent? Junior knows that the 10,000 demon realm has a space vein and also the Dawn Rain continent. If the 3 continents also have space veins that lead to the 10,000 demon realm, then can't Junior return to the Dawn Rain continent through the 10,000 demon realm? Therefore, Junior wants to see what the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm looks like first. Who told you that the 3 continents have space veins that lead to the 10,000 demon realm? Fairy Xingyue sneered. How come I don't know about this? Xingyue, Suji said, you and I should understand the feeling of returning home. Even if the 3 continents have no space channel that leads to the 10,000 demon realm, this is still Xiaohua's hope. If he can find something in the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm, wouldn't that be better? I'll listen to you. Fairy Xingyue impatiently turned to Dongfang Yushan and said, You and the others drive the flying boat first and fly over there. Yes, Junior understands. Dongfang Yushan and the others heard this and hurriedly flew over. Although they didn't know what was going on, they still drove the flying boat. Junior will be back soon. Xiaohua nodded at Suji and Fairy Xingyue. His figure flickered and disappeared into the green vines in a moment. Oh! Seeing a few wisps of green wood light flashing above the flying boat, Fairy Xingyue was a little surprised. Xiaohua actually knows the wood escape technique. Yes, and he seems to be very proficient in it. Suji was also a little surprised, but his tone was more of admiration. Let's go. Fairy Xingyue urged Dongfang Yushan and the others to drive the flying boat away, while Xiaohua's figure appeared in another layer of green vines in the distance. This was a place full of green vines. There were thick vines between heaven and earth. These vines were either covered with fine hair or sharp thorns. Of course, there were more vines that were born with some strange runes. The vines floated in the air, forming clouds. The original ground was also covered with vines. There were also many spiritual grasses among the green vines on the ground. These spiritual grasses looked a little different from those in the 3 continents and the Dawn Rain continent. Not only were they much thicker, but there were also some strange veins on the surface of the spiritual grasses. Before Xiaohua appeared, there was a rustling sound in the whole world of green vines, as if the wind had blown past. However, after Xiaohua appeared, the rustling sound immediately disappeared. Although Xiaohua heard the sound of the wind, the surrounding space was quiet. Xiaohua smiled slightly. His figure flickered and disappeared again. After the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the originally quiet space was once again filled with rustling sounds. Furthermore, between the vines, the spirit trees, and the spirit grasses, there were some green balls of light that were faintly swaying. Swoosh! There was a ripple in the space, and Xiaohua's figure appeared again. However, the green shadows floating among the green vines and plants disappeared instantly, and returned to their original state. Hee hee! Xiaohua smiled slightly and did not stay here. His figure slowly flew and shuttled between the green vines. At this time, he understood that the so-called 10,000 demon realm was somewhat different from the 1,000 demon sacred realm. Although they both had the word demon The demons in the 1,000 demons sacred realm were demons with flesh and blood, which was the demon race that corresponded to the human race. The demons in the 10,000 demon realm, other than the demon race in the 1,000 demons sacred realm, there were also grass demons, water demons, and mountain demons. In other words, anything that could become a spirit in the world was a demon in the 10,000 demon realm. After flying for an entire meal's worth of time, Xiaohua stopped again. At this time, there were no longer green vines between the heaven and earth. Instead, there were some huge trees standing in great numbers. There was some light fog floating between these huge trees, and some indescribable light and shadow were faintly discernible in the light fog. There were even some obscure sounds coming from this light fog. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and took out the Kunlun mirror. As the light vibrated, Xiaohua flew out from the Shenhua continent. Master! When Xiaohua saw Xiaohua, her small mouth flattened and cried out. She choked and said, "This little one is useless, this little one is ashamed to face Master." "Ah? What's wrong?" Xiaohua was shocked. "Xiaohua, don't worry, tell me slowly." "Master, I can't grow the spirit grass that you asked me to bring home." Xiaohua wiped her tears as she recounted the whole story in shame. Xiaohua wanted to laugh, but when he saw Xiaohua's extremely serious look, he tried to be serious and said, "Xiaohua, don't worry, this is not your fault. It's Master who didn't think it through." "Is that so?" "Master, it's not that this little one didn't do it well?" Xiaohua was surprised. The crystal clear tears still hung on her face. Xiaohua nodded and said, "Of course, those spiritual herbs are not ordinary spiritual herbs. They are the immortal herbs used to refine the golden core you saw last time. He can't plant them on the Shenhua continent." "Haha, so it's like this. This little one thought that this little one didn't need them." Xiaohua's tears turned into laughter. Her curved eyes were filled with tears. She was extremely cute. Xiaohua lovingly wiped away the tears in the corner of Xiaohua's eyes and said, "Don't worry about those immortal herbs, Master has more important things to give you." "Okay, Master, please tell me." Xiaohua puffed out her small chest and said, "This little one will definitely complete it. You can definitely do this." Xiaohua smiled, but suddenly he thought of another thing and asked, "What about that Ganoderma? Master hasn't seen it for a long time?" Chapter 45-31. Xiaohua had snatched the Ganoderma horse from Yin Guichong in the sword tomb back then. The Ganoderma horse had turned into a spirit herb as soon as it entered the space, but after the yin and yang split in Xiaohua's space, the Ganoderma horse had regained its spirit body. At the same time, Xiaohua was also born in the space, becoming the first plant spirit body to take form in Xiaohua's space. After Xiaohua, no more plant spirits were born in Xiaohua's space. It was as if all the Zhongxios were gathered in Xiaohua's body. Because of Xiaohua, who was self-taught in the art of refining pills, Xiaohua almost didn't pay attention to the Ganoderma horse. Xiaohua had appeared on the Ganoderma horse earlier, but when Xiaohua came out alone, Xiaohua had completely forgotten about the Ganoderma horse. At that moment, Xiaohua had some plans in his heart, and only then did he remember the Ganoderma horse he had in the past. "I'll let Master know," Xiaohua said in all seriousness. "I used to play with the Ganoderma horse, but later I had to refine pills and share Master's worries, so I didn't have time to play with him. I saw the Ganoderma horse play very well with Little Silver a while ago." "Little Silver?" Xiaohua couldn't help smiling bitterly again, and the image of a chubby spirit mouse appeared in his mind. Xiaohua's experience in the heavenly prison had left him without any distractions, and he had also left Little Silver in the cold on Shenhua continent. "It seems that Little Silver's mother has come back recently, so the Ganoderma horse should be with them," Xiaohua said like a little adult again. "Haha, if that's the case, then that's good. You all can go and help Master." Xiaohua couldn't help laughing when he heard this. He waved his hand to shake the Kunlun mirror, and brought Little Black, Little Yellow, Little Silver, and the Ganoderma horse out of Shenhua continent. "Daddy!" As soon as they were out of the space, Little Yellow bounced and said, Do you miss the boy? Could it be that there was something that made things difficult for father again? Don't be afraid, the boy has already grown up. The boy will help you. Hello, Daddy, Little Black said and stood quietly on the side. Master. Sure enough, Little Silver was still fat, and his body looked several times bigger than before. He didn't have the spirit mouse's intelligence at all. The Ganoderma seemed a little afraid of Xiaohua. It had been wagging its tail next to Xiaohua, but when it saw Xiaohua, it immediately tucked its tail between its hind legs and opened its mouth, but didn't say anything. Why don't you guys take a look at where we are first? Xiaohua looked at these little things with a smile and asked in a low voice. Where? Where is this? Goldie looked around in surprise and asked a few questions. Then, it said regretfully, There's nothing strange about it. Father, there isn't even a beauty in this place. Why did you come here? Sweat. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He didn't know if he should reprimand Goldie. This place seems to be different from the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Blackie looked around and said with some doubt, However, there are actually quite a few spiritual items here. Little Silver's little eyes looked around, and a lazy expression appeared on his face. Master. Xiaoguo was pleasantly surprised. This little one seems to sense a very familiar aura. There seem to be many companions who are similar to this little one. And Xiaohua smiled like an old fox. Do you think it's better for these little friends to fend for themselves here? Or to cultivate on Shenhua continent like you and learn alchemy? Of course it's better for them to stay on Shenhua continent. Xiaoguo answered without hesitation. To be able to do something for the master, to be able to make a difference, and not waste one's life, this is the greatest happiness. To fend for themselves in this place, it's simply a waste of time. Good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, Master's task for you is that you must think of a way to help more little friends like you, so that they can pull themselves together from this waste of time and become useful spirits. Really? Hearing Xiaohua's words, Xiaoguo's face glowed with a holy light, and a heavy sense of mission made even his voice a little low. Of course. Xiaohua nodded. I'll leave the task of saving the fallen spirits on this land to you. Don't worry, Master, this little one will definitely complete this task. From now on, they must turn over a new leaf and work hard. Saying this, Xiaoguo's figure flashed as he was about to fly away. Xiaohua hurriedly called out, Let Jima follow you. Ride him over there. Okay. Xiaoguo was even more grateful as he rode Jima away. Daddy. Goldie smiled and said, Could it be that you've taken a fancy to some big sister? You're too embarrassed to say it, so let boy do it. Go. Xiaohua glared at Goldie and said, Go and find as many spirits as possible for Daddy. Don't you think Shenhua continent is too cold? That's right, that's right. Goldie's eyes lit up. That's right, big sister Dia watches you and Ya cultivate every day and doesn't have time to talk to boy at all. If you can find some spirits to talk to, spirits with some lines, that would be even better. Boy will go now. Saying this, without waiting for Xiaohua to say anything else, Goldie slipped away like a wisp of smoke. Boy, go and take a look too. Little Black was always half a beat slower, and only now did he say this unhurriedly as he flew over. Seeing that all the little things had gone and he was the only one left, Little Silver was a little flustered and made a squeaking sound. Xiaohua waved his hand and instructed, You go too, and take a look to see if there's anything good. Yes, Master. Little Silver was overjoyed, and with a flash of silver light, he disappeared in a moment. Ha ha! Xiaohua laughed heartily. He could almost see a bustling scene of a group of plant spirits like Xiaoguo refining pills in Shenhua continent one after another, and piles of pills were being refined endlessly. Xiaohua smiled, sat down cross-legged, and began to meditate in meditation. He knew that this was a place where spirits were everywhere. If he released his divine sense or pressure, it would disturb the spirits, and have a bad impact on his plan. Seeing that 2 hours had passed and Xiaoguo and the others still hadn't returned, Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. He was afraid that Fairy Xingyu would get impatient, and release her divine sense, or come to look for him personally. It was also here that some light and shadows flashed in the distance. Xiaohua hurriedly stood up and was about to send a telepathic message, but when he saw the situation in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but be a little stunned. Admittedly, Xiaohua could think of using the advantage of Xiaoguo's spirit body to trick those spirit bodies of plants, but he still underestimated Xiaoguo's persuasive power and charisma. He saw that under the green vines in the distance, rays of light and shadow were floating over like water. In front of them, Xiaoguo was riding on the Ganoderma horse, gesturing and saying something to several spirit bodies. Of course, these spirits weren't human, but plants and trees. Seeing Xiaohua, Xiaoguo hurriedly jumped down from the Ganoderma horse and flew in front of Xiaohua to salute respectfully. Master, this little one was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. These are the 10 herbaceous tribes here. They know that Master is kind-hearted and are willing to serve Master. 10 herbaceous tribes? Xiaohua recovered from his surprise and said in a low voice, I'm afraid there are more than 10,000 spirits? I'll let Master know, Xiaoguo said proudly. Of the 10 herbaceous tribes, only 6 tribes have tribe leaders, and each tribe has about 13,000 spirit bodies like this little one. The 10 herbaceous tribes have a total of 150,000 spirit bodies. This many? Xiaohua looked at the light and shadows, and couldn't help but understand. Herbaceous spirit bodies were very thin, and could be the size of a thumb or as thick as a blade of grass. One light and shadow could have more than 10 spirit bodies, so 150,000 spirit bodies really wasn't a lot. Yes, Master, Xiaoguo nodded. If Master is willing, this little one will teach them the art of alchemy one by one. Of course. Xiaohua smiled. Are they all willing to come to Xinhua continent? Of course, Xiaoguo answered. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth here is already somewhat dried up, and herbaceous spirit bodies can't defeat wood spirit bodies, not to mention those beast races. So when this little one said it, they were all very happy. It's just that they still have 2 requests. What requests? Xiaohua was overjoyed. This was a win-win situation, and it was exactly what he wanted to see. The first request is that these 6 tribe leaders want to go and see the situation of our Xinhua continent. Xiaoguo smiled and pointed at the 6 slightly larger spirit bodies. When the 6 spirit bodies saw that Xiaohua had seen them, they immediately lowered their heads respectfully and placed their hands on their foreheads that were like stalks of grass. No problem. Xiaohua smiled and took out the Kunlun mirror and said, Master can send them in at any time. What's the second request? The second request is that Master can also turn them into a human form like this little one, Xiaoguo said proudly. They are very envious of this little one's appearance. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, This shouldn't be a problem. However, if they want to turn into a human form, they need to cultivate. Master can't help just because you want to. Only when they cultivate to the same level as you, then they can transform. Yes, this little one understands. Xiaoguo replied and flew over to communicate with the 6 spirit bodies. Sure enough, when the 6 spirit bodies nodded, they once again transformed into a human form with a smile. Master, bring them in. Xiaoguo turned her head and said to Xiaohua. Xiaohua urged the Kunlun mirror to bring Xiaoguo and the 6 spirit bodies into the space. The Kunlun mirror flashed, scaring the spirit bodies into fleeing like water. Xiaohua didn't pay attention to these spirit bodies. His mind entered the space and turned into a jade archive. Xiaohua stood in midair. It was a bit strange. The 6 spirit bodies that followed Xiaoguo into the space were actually 6 vague human forms on Xinhua continent. They were much clearer and stronger than when they were in the space fragment. The 6 spirit bodies seemed to have noticed this, and they whispered something to each other. After a while, the 6 spirit bodies looked at the spirit fields again, and respectfully said something to Xiaoguo. The Jade Archive Xiaohua saw that the matter was more or less settled, and sent them out of the space. The 6 tribe leaders fell into the space fragment, and the dim light and shadows returned. They didn't wait for Xiaoguo to say anything, and floated into the scattered light and shadows. The light and shadows began to flicker, and in just a moment, a pair of light and shadows under the lead of the tribe leaders floated in front of Xiaohua. Chapter 45-32. Master! Little Fruit smiled and said, "You can take them into your home first, and then I'll take you to take their original bodies as well." Okay. Xiaohua shook the Kunlun mirror, and his mind swept through these light shadows. Although there were more than 10,000 spiritual bodies, they did not consume much spiritual power, and were taken into Shenhua continent in a moment. Soon after, the rest of the 9 plant races were also sucked into the space. Xiaohua was once again led by Xiaogui and Jima to a forest of giant trees. There were a lot of spirit grasses in this forest, but they didn't have any luster and looked listless. Presumably, without their spirit bodies, these spirit grasses had lost their essence. After Xiaohua took a look, the bodies of the 10 spiritual herbs on the 100 mu of land were also taken into the space. However, after taking these spiritual herbs, Xiaohua looked at the other spiritual herbs on the ground, and then looked at the 100 mu of empty space, and he fell into deep thought. Compared to the entire space fragment, the spiritual bodies that lived on the 100 mu of land were really a drop in the ocean. In other words, in this space fragment, the so-called spiritual bodies of herbs and wood were innumerable, and these spiritual bodies consumed a lot of heaven and earth spirit chi in this space fragment. If this space fragment was in the 10,000 demon realm, it would be fine, but this fragment was in the meteor belt. Although there were realm storms in the meteor belt, there would be replenishment of heaven and earth spirit chi, but it was still limited. The reason why the space fragment in the immortal realm that Xiaohua first set foot in was torn apart was because the space exit had been suppressed for a long time, and the expansion was unstoppable. On the other hand, it had something to do with the lack of immortal chi. Now, the space fragment in the 10,000 demon realm was showing signs of heaven and earth spirit chi drying up. If these spiritual bodies did not have other opportunities, they would disappear along with the heaven and earth spirit chi. Instead of letting these spiritual bodies disappear, it was better to let them move to Shenhua continent. At that thought, Xiaohua transformed back into a jade archive and landed on the Shenhua continent. At that moment, the 150,000 spirit bodies were excitedly staying in their main bodies, desperately absorbing the abundant heaven and earth spirit light that was of a higher grade than the heaven and earth spirit energy. All of them had long transformed into human forms. Jade Archive Xiaohua used his divine ability to imprint his will into the minds of these spirit bodies. These spirit bodies went crazy and were as excited as Xiaogui. After being sent out of the space by Jade Archive Xiaohua, they went towards the spatial fragment. Master! Looking at the many spirits frantically rushing away, even Xiaogui was stupefied. He calmed himself down, and looking up at Xiaohua with extreme worship, he said, "You're really amazing! This lowly one had to spend a lot of effort before they finally allowed this lowly one to see their clan leader. Only when this lowly one's mouth was parched did those clan leaders agree to come and take a look. Master only said a few words and it made them so crazy. This little one really admires you." Hee hee. Xiaohua laughed. He was really proud in his heart. He had done many things like plundering, but this was the first time he had done something like tricking a spirit body. He didn't expect Xiaogui to be so effective. And when he acted, it was even scarier. "Father, father!" At this moment, a slightly panicked voice came from afar. In midair, Xiao Huang's figure was flying over like the wind. Behind him, Xiao He was following closely. The 2 little ones' faces were somewhat nervous. Looking behind the 2 little ones, an earthen yellow spirit body that was several hundred feet in size was chasing after them. This spirit body was like a mountain. It didn't have any hands or feet. It flew in midair like a rolling ball. The air around the spirit body surged, setting off a series of whirlwinds. These whirlwinds were like raging waves that pounced on Xiao Huang. The earthen yellow spirit body emitted a very strange aura. It was very dignified, but it didn't have enough power. When it landed on Xiaohua, it didn't attract too much attention. Xiaohua frowned. His divine sense condensed like a hammer. Honk! It smashed on top of the earthen yellow spirit body. The earthen yellow spirit body spun in the air and actually stopped there. A burst of obscure fluctuations came over. These fluctuations were mixed with some vibrating sounds like pines. Master! Hearing this, Xiaogua hurriedly said, "This spirit body asked who Master was and why you blocked it." At this moment, Xiaohuang had already flown to Xiaohua's side. He looked very courageous. He turned his head and his big tail proudly wagged behind him. He shouted, come over if you have the ability." Xiaohua frowned and said, "Xiaohuang, what's going on?" Xiaohuang didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly replied, "Father, the boy obeyed orders and went to look for the spirit body in this space. In this space, there were spirit bodies everywhere. However, they were all ordinary. The boy felt that these spirit bodies might not be of interest to his father, so he went to look for them in the distance. When the boy saw this big guy, he felt that he was more suitable to be his father's subordinate, so he told him about it. In the end, this guy didn't want to. If he didn't want to, then he didn't want to. The boy also didn't force him. When he was about to leave, the boy happened to see another spirit body with a good figure. Speaking of this spirit body, Father, Yuanya is really too boring. How can he be worthy of Sister Dyer? The boy thought that if he brought this spirit body home, he would first break them up. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly interrupted Xiaogua's endless words and asked, "Get to the point. Why did this spirit body want to kill you?" The boy also doesn't know. Xiaohuang was also puzzled. When the boy saw this spirit body, he used his silver tongue and talked about our family's beauty, Yuanya's strength, and his outstanding strength. The boy didn't say anything clearly. He just told the spirit body that he would find her a good husband. This big guy flew into a rage and wanted to kill the boy without saying anything. Xiaohua ignored Xiaohuang and turned to ask Xiaohei, "Is Xiaohuang telling the truth?" "Yes, father," Xiaohei replied concisely. "And?" Xiaohua nodded. He looked up at the spirit body and asked again, "What about that so-called good figure spirit body?" "I don't know. He shouldn't be here," Xiaohuang hurriedly replied. "That spirit body is very shy, Xiaohuang." Xiaohua nodded and ordered, "Go, apologize to this spirit body. Say that you disturbed him and that it was a misunderstanding." "Why?" Xiaohuang raised his little face and said stubbornly, "How did I provoke him? I didn't touch a single hair on his body. I just talked to him, talked to another spirit body, and he wanted to kill me. He should apologize to me. Also, Father, you are a Mahayana cultivator, a supreme existence in the 3 continents. Boy apologizing to him will make Father lose face." Xiaohua was somewhat displeased. He snorted and said, "Xiaohuang, Father doesn't know what you did wrong. But don't forget, you were the one who spoke to him first. If you didn't speak, why would he want to kill you? How about this, Xiaohuang, think about it carefully. If you think you're not wrong, Father will kill this spirit body right now. I definitely won't let him go back alive. What do you think? As long as you pat your chest and say that you're not wrong." Xiaohuang hurriedly replied, "Father, you don't have to kill him, right? You just have to drive him away." "Yes," Xiaohua said resolutely, "as long as you dare to pat your chest and say that you're not wrong." "This?" Xiaohuang hesitated. He raised his little paw and didn't lower it. In the end, he said, "Father, this may be a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" Xiaohua asked. Boy didn't speak to that spirit body, and this big guy didn't have a particularly extreme reaction. It's just that the boy spoke too much, and this big guy became angry. Although Xiaohuang was a chatterbox, his thoughts were quite meticulous. He was still able to put himself in the other's shoes. "Then go and apologize." Xiaohua nodded. Although Father needs face, Father disdains this kind of meaningless face. Furthermore, Father doesn't want you to become a hedonistic son of a rich family who bullies others. "Yes, Father." Goldie was quick to correct his mistake. He nodded and walked to a spot not far away. He faced the spiritual body and sang, "Big brother, I was rash earlier. If there's any trouble, please forgive me. As the saying goes, mountains don't move, water moves, and water doesn't move, demons move. We're all demons, and we see each other all the time. The mountains don't change, and the water flows forever." Roar. Without waiting for Xiao Huang to finish speaking, the mountain-like spirit body roared loudly. A fist-like thing flew out from the spirit body, streaking across the sky, and was about to smash Xiao Huang's body. Xiao Huang's figure flashed, and he was about to dodge. However, he thought of Xiao Hua's words, and his figure once again stood in the distance, not daring to move. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered. He grabbed again, and a huge golden hand that was several hundred zhang in size appeared out of thin air. Under the huge hand, not to mention the mountain-like spirit body that was several hundred zhang in size, even the space of several thousand zhang in size was imprisoned. Immediately, that huge hand slightly grabbed again. The mountain-like spirit body trembled and rapidly shrank. In a moment, it actually shrank to several hundred zhang in size. Woo-woo! Right at this moment, from the place where the mountain-like spirit body had flown over, another thin and tall spirit body arrived along with the wind. Before it could even fly in front of Xiao Hua, it immediately fell down in midair and babbled something from its mouth that no one knew what it was saying. "Master!" Xiao Gua hurriedly shouted. This spirit body said that this concubine is willing to serve this young master. "Master, please spare her husband." Husband? Xiao Huang looked at this thin and tall spirit body in disbelief. He then looked at the spirit body that was several hundred zhang in size and said in shock, "This difference, isn't it too big?" "Xiao Huang," Xiao Hua said coldly. "Did you see?" "Father," Xiao Huang hurriedly replied. "It's all this boy's fault. Boy didn't expect it to be like this." "Xiao Gua," Xiao Hua nodded. "Explain to this spirit body." "Yes." Xiao Gua hurriedly flew over and helped the thin and tall spirit body up. After a few words, the spirit body's head transformed into a rather beautiful woman's appearance. She looked at Xiao Hua, then at Xiao Huang, and nodded. Chapter 45-33. After hearing this, Xiao Gua respectfully says to Xiao Hua, "Master, she said she understood. Earlier little Huang spoke too fast so she didn't understand. I reckon her husband also didn't understand." And Xiao Hua nods his head. With a wave of his big sleeve, that golden big hand immediately disappears. And that mountain-like spiritual body returns to its original size of several hundred zhang. At this moment, this mountain-like spiritual body doesn't dare to move carelessly. That huge spiritual body slowly rotates in midair. No one knows what it is thinking. That slender spiritual body flies to the mountain-like spiritual body's side and mutters a few words. The two spiritual bodies are about to turn around. Whoa! A gust of wind sounds. On the ground all around, spiritual bodies rush over like a flood from the space. The first one is the wood spiritual body who volunteered to go around looking for spiritual bodies. "Master, master!" Before the group of spiritual bodies even get close, they shout loudly, "Quickly open the door, we are waiting for you to come back." Unfortunately, Xiao Hua doesn't understand this voice. After Xiao Gua reminds him, Xiao Hua takes out Kunlun mirror. With a wave of his hand, Kunlun mirror transforms into a huge door in midair. Those spiritual bodies who come into contact with the light pillar above this door all disappear. Damn it! Xiao Hua looks at the seemingly endless amount of spiritual bodies among the green vines and huge trees. He unconsciously smiles bitterly. This movement is too big, isn't it? Even if I don't want to attract the attention of the two immortals, I'm afraid I can't do it now. Master! Suddenly, Xiao Gua says again. That spiritual body wants to go to our house to take a look. What is he going to do? Xiao Hua is somewhat impatient. He waves his hand and says, "Even if he can go in, I'm afraid it won't be easy to take his main body in." "That," Xiao Gua says hesitantly. This spiritual body seems to want to send his wife in, but his wife is not willing to leave him. He even scolded his wife. His wife is still crying over there. Ai. Xiaohua hears and his heart is moved. He sighs and says, "Who says plants are heartless and mountains are heartless? No matter if it is a mountain or a plant, as long as it has a spirit, it will have feelings. The Tao of Heaven allows them to have spirits. How can this Xiao not fulfill their wishes?" "Xiaogua, let them in." "Yes, master." Xiaogua happily agreed. The two spiritual bodies also fell into the Kunlun mirror's light pillar. Xiaohua's consciousness also followed in. As expected of the two spirits that entered Shenhua continent, one transformed into an extremely burly man, while the other transformed into a lithe woman. The two of them looked at each other with wild joy before looking around and whispering something to each other. The two spirits seemed to be quarreling, and then they hugged each other and cried. In the end, both of them made up their minds. Xiaohua understood a little. After waiting for a while, Xiaohua pulled them out of the space. The two spirits hurriedly kowtowed to Xiaohua and opened their mouths to say something. Xiaogua said from the side, "Master, one of them said that you must let her enter the space, and the other said that if he doesn't enter, she won't enter either." Although Xiaogua's words didn't distinguish between he and she, Xiaohua understood. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Tell them to go back first. In a while, I will go and see how big this big guy's body is. If it's possible, I will also take him." "Okay." Xiaogua nodded and relayed Xiaohua's words. The two spirits left in high spirits. "You and the others go back first." Xiaohua's heart stirred. With a sweep of his consciousness, he put Xiaogua and the others into the space. "Eh? Where did Little Silver go? Why isn't he back yet?" Xiaohua looked into the distance, and was truly bewildered. He thought to himself, "He won't be like Little Huang and cause a huge mess, right? Hee." Just as Xiaohua was thinking this, he heard Fairy Xingyu's laughter in the air. "I knew it! What can happen to you? Sure enough, you're thinking about the spirits in this space fragment again. But Xiaohua, don't you think your ambition is a little too big?" Xiaohua smiled and looked at Fairy Xingyu, who had revealed herself in the void. He shrugged and said, "Senior, this junior's heart is very small. How can it be too big and too wild? One spirit body to refine one immortal pill. You have so many spirits, how many immortal pills do you need to refine? You don't know how to refine them now. You have so many spirits, just to refine immortal pills for yourself in the future?" Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua and asked, "Don't you think what you're doing is going against heaven and earth? Refine immortal pills?" Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart stirred. He thought of the medicinal pill he had refined for Fairy Hongxia back in Million Meng Mountains. That flying shadow pill seemed to have been made with the help of spirit blood. That was just spirit blood, and the flying shadow pill had such a powerful effect. If he used spirit bodies to refine immortal pills, what grade would it be? "Senior misunderstands this junior." Xiaohua smiled and explained the situation. Finally, he said, "Since the spirit energy of heaven and earth in this space fragment is about to dry up, and this junior's Kunlun mirror needs spirit bodies to expand its spirit energy, why can't this junior take these spirits into the Kunlun mirror? If that's the case, this action of yours will benefit the spirit bodies." Fairy Xingyu seemed to be deep in thought. She did not ask Xiaohua how he could understand the words of the spirit bodies, nor did she ask what method he had used to coax these spirit bodies into the mirror. Instead, she said, "However, do you think you have the Dharma power to control so many spirit bodies in the Kunlun mirror?" "How would I know if I don't try?" Xiaohua retorted. "These spirits are going to die anyway. Don't tell me they'll die there? Humph, you're waiting for them to die before using their bodies, right?" Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua confidently and asked. Xiaohua shrugged and said, "Senior, you can think whatever you want. Anyway, these spirits already believe this junior. What a glib tongue." Fairy Xingyu curled her lips and said, "Fairy Baihua was fooled like this back then. This is two different things." Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Forget it. Do whatever you want, Fairy Xingyu said. Release the disciples of Zhai Xinglu from the Kunlun mirror. Ah? Why? Xiaohua asked curiously. Isn't there a meteor belt ahead? Isn't it not there yet? At this point, Xiaohua seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He hurriedly covered his mouth and laughed. Ha, this junior understands. What do you understand? Fairy Xingyu said somewhat angrily. I'm not as despicable as you think. I'm just thinking that after the meteor belt, your Kunlun mirror can no longer be used. You have to send the disciples of Zhai Xinglu out from this spatial fragment. I've never thought of letting them touch the spatial fragment of the 10,000 demon realm. Xiaohua smiled and raised his hand to point at the Kunlun mirror. A beam of light separated and the disciples of Zhai Xinglu flew out from it. They all landed in the air. Xiaohua still said, Elder sister, this junior didn't say anything. This is all your own idea. Spirit bodies? Among the disciples of Zhai Xinglu, there were naturally knowledgeable ones. When they saw the tide of spirit bodies pouring into Xiaohua's space, they could not help but cry out. Hee, these spirit bodies are not fated to be with you, Xiaohua said with a smile. There may be some spiritual herbs, spiritual fruits, and other things ahead. You can go ahead and take a look. At this point, Xiaohua knew that Fairy Xingyu had come here because she was attracted by the tide of spirit bodies. However, her original intention was to let the disciples of Zhai Xinglu collect more spiritual herbs in this spatial fragment. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and waved her hand. All of you, follow me. Yes, Palace Master. No one dared to be negligent, and all answered respectfully. After the disciples of Zhai Xinglu had left, Xiaohua looked at the spirit bodies that were still pouring in. He was really shocked and thought to himself, Damn it, how many spirit bodies are there in this spatial fragment? I've already collected so many, but why can't I see an end to them? The 10 herb clans. How can they be more deceptive than Xiaohua? After a full hour, the spirit bodies that were pouring in gradually decreased. Xiaohua did not know how many spirit bodies he had collected. However, he knew very well that in today's Shenhua continent, the number of spirit bodies had long surpassed that of the human clan. It was just that these spirit bodies were confined in a certain area by him, and the human clan on Shenhua continent did not know about it at all. The spirit bodies of the 10,000 demon realm fragment had entered the spatial fragment, but their bodies were still in the spatial fragment. Xiaohua did not know how the spirit bodies cultivated, and he did not dare to abandon the bodies of these spirit bodies. After waiting for another hour, when all the spirit bodies had entered the spatial fragment, Xiaohua pointed at the Kunlun mirror again. The Kunlun mirror flew into the air. As Xiaohua's hands moved, hundreds of thick crystal lights fell into the spatial fragment like thunderbolts. The entire Kunlun mirror began to roar and gradually expanded. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the Kunlun mirror had turned into 100 miles in size. Then, Xiaohua's figure flashed and landed on the Kunlun mirror. The Kunlun mirror emitted a huge beam of light that shone on the ground and landed between the green vines and the giant trees. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The spiritual herbs and trees that had lost their essence rushed into the Kunlun mirror. Then, Xiaohua activated the Kunlun mirror to check the entire spatial fragment. This spatial fragment was not big, but it was definitely not small either. It had a radius of millions of miles. Xiaohua spent several days before he finally managed to absorb the true bodies of those spiritual bodies into his body. During the collection process, Xiaohua naturally rolled his eyes at Fairy Xingyu. When the disciples of the scholarly cultivator families and Zhai Xinglu saw how powerful Xiaohua's magic treasure was, they respectfully avoided him, but there were also envious gazes. While collecting the bodies of the spiritual herbs, Xiaohua naturally paid attention to Little Silver's whereabouts. However, when Xiaohua collected all the spiritual herbs, he did not see Little Silver. Strange. Xiaohua was even more puzzled. Did Little Silver encounter some danger? However, I don't seem to have seen any spirit body above 5th grade in this spatial fragment. With little silver strength, how could he be in danger? After collecting the Kunlun mirror, Xiaohua urged his figure to check on Su Ji's injuries. After all, after falling into the spatial fragment, Su Ji did not come down from the flying boat. Xiaohua had a bad feeling in his heart. But at that moment, Xiaohua suddenly thought of the mountain-like spirit body. Xiaohua hurriedly asked Little Black where the spirit body was and urged his figure to come to a rare spirit mountain. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.